All right. Welcome to the Village of Lake Bluff Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals regular meeting on April 17th, 2024. If you could call the roll, please, Ms. Gable.
Member Danley is absent. Member Fisher? Here. Member Miller?
Here.
Member Russell?
Here.
Member Sorensen? Here. Member Toll?
Here.
And Chair Peters.
Here.
All right, we have quorum.
Just a preliminary comment tonight. We've got a rather full agenda. We've got a rather full house. As a courtesy, we want to make sure that there's proper decorum, that there's quiet, and that we can work our way through all of the agenda as best we can, as efficiently as we can. So thank you very much. Agenda item number 2, non-agenda items and visitors' public comment time. We allocate 15 minutes at the beginning of each meeting to allow any individual who has an issue that's not on the formal agenda to present. Is there anyone here tonight who would like to present? Anyone online, Ms. Gable?
There is somebody that's raising their hand online, and we would just want to make sure that this is for something that's not on the agenda, but I'm going to allow them to talk.
If you could state your name for the record, sir, and
Yeah, thank you. My name is Bob Clifford, 320 Circle Drive. I did want to have a comment about the pickleball issue, so if this is not the correct time for that.
yeah, a little too early, Bob.
Okay.
Probably realistically, not until 7:30, perhaps.
That's fine, I'll hang on.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
All right. Agenda item number 3, consideration of the March 20, 2024 regular meeting minutes. I trust that the commissioners have had a chance to review any proposed revisions or other changes. George,
I move we approve.
is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Agenda item number 4, Ms. Gable.
So agenda item number 4, the informal review for 229 Prospect Avenue. The person seeking that informal review has asked to continue that to the next meeting. So we will do that.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5.
Yes. Agenda item number 5 is an informal review for 105 Albrecht Drive. Miss Janet Stengel of Daspin and Almond LLP, on behalf of the owner of 105 Albrecht Drive, is seeking informal review of a proposed plan to subdivide the subject property and construct 2 luxury automotive storage buildings. And I am getting the PowerPoint presentation up. All right.
If you could state your name for the record and then please proceed.
Yes, thank you. My name is Janet Stengel with an address of 300 South Wacker of the law offices of Daspin and Almond LLP. Good evening, members of the board. We are here today to discuss the informal review of zoning approvals required in connection with a proposed plat of subdivision for the property located at 105 Albrecht Drive. Here with me today are representatives from the property owner, Lake Bluff Storage LLC. Next slide, please. The property owner intends to subdivide an existing lot at 105 Albrecht Drive into 2 lots. Lot 1 to the north will remain an existing self-storage facility, and Lot 2 is intended to be developed into a luxury automotive self-storage facility. Next slide, please. The zoning approvals required in connection with this plat of subdivision are a variation from the side yard requirements from the south side yard in Lot 1, a variation from the number of parking spaces required in Lot 1, and the Architectural Board's review of the location of the parking spaces in both lots. Next slide, please. The site is currently improved and occupied by Life Storage, a self-storage facility. There's also space in the building for another tenant. We can see here the entrance to the self-storage facility and 13 parking spaces to the north. Next slide, please. The life storage building is 114,377 square feet and is operated by 2 employees. The slide shows the loading areas for the existing building. Next slide, thanks. Here we see the south parking lot for the existing self-storage building. As you can see, during business hours, this parking lot is not used by the customers of the self-storage facility. Next slide, please. Here's a rendering of the proposed project for Lot 2, which we developed into a luxury automobile storage facility. There will be 2 buildings for the luxury car storage. Next slide. Each building will be 12,000 square feet and include 32 car storage units. 1 to 2 employees will operate the storage buildings. And there is capacity for 54 parking spaces, which meets the zoning code, which will either be in front of the parking garages, as you can see here, or there's also capacity to include parking in the middle of the 2 buildings. I would now ask Mike Sierick to provide additional information on the operations of the proposed luxury car facility.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mike Sierick. I'm one of the owners of the existing facility. And Janet did a nice job kind of outlining what it is that we're proposing to do. And the idea today is to get some feedback from the board on our concept plan and what we're thinking so that we know how to formally address you when we bring it before you. So the understanding is, you know, it was one lot and we converted the existing building. As you can see, we added on and we created our what we call traditional self-storage, which is for people to come and store their mostly household goods. The parcel has a very large asphalt lot that was used when that building was a manufacturing facility. That south lot won't be used ever for what our purpose is, which is the self-storage. So the intent is to take and do something with that south lot. We know from our studies that there is a unmet demand for some luxury car parking in this market. So we've designed this product to meet that need. We have done similar designs in other areas, one in Willowbrook and one in Wheaton, and we feel, you know, quite strong that this market can, you know, support 54 units. So what we'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about the plan. This is a little different than the things we've done in Willowbrook or Wheaton. They're individual garages. It'll be completely gated and controlled access for these customers. It'll be separated from the traditional storage. So these customers will come and go as they wish, as 24/7 to come and take their cars. But the way the operation really works is people will keep their cars here. It's really car enthusiasts that have multiple cars. They don't necessarily keep them in their own garages because they have kids' bicycles and wagons and things. And so these are high-end cars that they typically keep, you know, in another location. And customers will come and either bring another vehicle, pull out their luxury car, and put their family vehicle in and take the car for the weekend or the week or the day or what have you. I know there's a question about additional parking here. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of space between both buildings. And the reason for that is there is a very large utility easement that runs along that south parking lot. That utility easement is 55 feet in width. And so the orientation of these buildings is such to, you know, avoid that large easement that runs through the property. So again, to give you some just background on how the facility works, it's almost, you know, really low maintenance. There's very few people that come and go. It'll be controlled via gate control. The entire facility would be fenced, and it will work independent of the traditional self-storage that we have created and that we're currently operating to the north. So I guess was there any other questions, John, that we needed to talk about? The parking, the easement, the variances. I think the key issue on the side yard setback. It really is the side yard between the two buildings that we're going to be owning. It's not the side yard setback between our buildings and the neighboring adjacent building. It's really between the two buildings that we own, where we're going to be looking for the variance.
Between those two buildings?
No, it would be between, the north building would be the building to the left, and the current building that we already have built.
Yes.
Yeah, if you want to back.
Thanks, Mike. Yes. Next slide, please. So yes, so here is the plat of subdivision proposed for this property. You can see Lot 1 and 2 on the existing parcels. Next slide, please. It's important to note that 2 zoning districts cover Lot 1. So we have an L1 light industry district and an L2 limited light industry district, both covering Lot 1. This requires us to make sure that the zoning in Lot 1 requires both zoning districts to comply. Next slide, please. Here we see the existing site plan showing the existing building for life storage and the parking lot to the south. Next slide. And here is the proposed site plan showing the existing life storage building and the 2 storage buildings proposed for luxury car storage to the south. Next slide. Again, these are the zoning approvals that we would be requesting once we move forward with the plat of subdivision. And we'd like to note that we did speak with members of the village board staff, including Clara and Jeff Hansen and Mike Croak, who were able to help us discuss these zoning approvals on a virtual call last month. Next slide, please. So as Mike mentioned, the first variation that we would seek is a variation from the side yard requirement, both in the L1 limited light industry, or in the L1 light industry and the L2 limited light industry. Both of these provisions require a side yard that we do not have in the proposed plan. The side yard proposed is 0, and both zoning districts require either an 80-foot side yard or a 53-foot side yard. As Mike mentioned, the easement, the utility and drainage easements are shown highlighted on this slide, which make it difficult for the property owner to design these 2 buildings in a way that is productive for the property and that represents a unity between the two parcels here. If we were to move forward with this variation, we would show that it complies with variation standards. As we are describing the unique physical conditions of the property in addition to the easements, we are working with multiple existing parking islands between the existing building and the proposed buildings and a pond to the east. There's a practical difficulty if we would be required to comply with the code for this side yard because the applicant would lose the north building and lose the financial viability of this project. But this variation is not sought to just make more money. We would be seeking this to make a viable commercial use of the empty parking lot. It would be designed in accordance with public health, safety, and welfare, in harmony with applicable codes, and within the character of the surrounding commercial buildings. Next slide. The second variation we would seek is a variation from both L1 and L2 requirements for the number of parking spaces. Both L1 and L2 have the same provisions for parking requirements under the zoning code, which would require about 115 parking spaces. The plan provides for 32 spaces. Again, if we were to move forward, the variation, we would show that it complies with variation standards, including the practical difficulty of meeting the zoning code here, when in practice, the traffic generated by customers of the self-storage facility is very low. Now I'd like to invite John to speak a little bit on the parking customers and how often traffic is generated from his experience in self-storage facilities.
With this facility, when it's right now, it's about 40% occupied after the first year. And when it's fully stabilized, we anticipate, maybe 30 people coming on a daily basis to the facility. The vast majority of them will be using our interior loading docks. So the exterior parking spaces, both on the north as well as on the south, are hardly ever used, except for employees, and we have 2 employees on site during the day. So the actual parking need, this is excessive for the use of this building, and we just won't need any more parking than this on a go-forward basis. You know, obviously, we invested multi-millions of dollars in the site, and it's going to remain a storage facility on a go-forward basis. Okay.
Thank you, John. Next slide, please. As you can see, here are the mostly unused parking lots that John just mentioned. We have the south lot and the north lot. And again, the purpose of developing a proposed Lot 2 is to create a commercially reasonable, successful project instead of an eyesore parking lot. Next slide. The last zoning approval we would seek is an architectural board review of the location of the parking spaces. Per the zoning code, the parking spaces should be located in the rear. However, due to the pond and the easements, that is not feasible for this project, and we would seek approval of the current location proposed for the parking spaces. Next slide. Thank you for your time in listening to our discussion of the zoning approvals needed for this project. We would entertain any questions and comments the board may have.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just preliminarily, a very nice packet that you put together, so we appreciate that. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Mr. Russell?
Just a point of clarification for
Sure.
everyone. You had mentioned that you were seeking a 0-foot south side yard variation, and that's not for the building. That's for the parking.
Correct.
Because the building is going to sit in 30 or 40 feet. I don't know what the number
Correct.
is. They're two.
60-foot difference between
Yeah,
the.
okay. Just so everyone understands.
Yes.
Normally, when we talk about a setback, somebody might be thinking they want the building on the lot line. That's not the case.
Correct,
Correct.
thank you, yes. Due to
And
the
then-
improvements.
And then your comment about the new part of the facility would be entirely fenced. That's not really what you're going to do, is it? You're not going to run a fence around the back of these buildings and enclose the lot.
We would, if you want to go back to there's an aerial shot there.
This one, okay?
Yeah, I don't have a pointer, but you could see the building that we're proposing north of the red, which is the easement. We would continue with a fence to the pond, and there would be a fence and, toward the street, and we would create a gate entrance on the southern egress point. So the cars, luxury cars would come in and traverse through there, and that would be completely then fenced, that south lot.
South end of the south lot, you're proposing a fence all the way along that?
Yes.
Okay.
The
I'm
building's
not-
kind of,
I'm not fresh on the requirements for fencing in the industrial park, but that would be a dramatic change, and I guess the architectural board of review is going to have to provide input on
It
that,
would-
because I didn't notice that on the plans.
yeah, it would be, the idea was, it's added security for these cars. Everything will be locked in the garages and things, but it's just added gate security, for our customers, to have egress and ingress. The buildings really act as a barrier, so we'll just be extending that and kind of, enclosing that with a gate is really what we're doing. But we can certainly work through that through the architectural committee so that it's aesthetically pleasing, but it really is for security purposes. That's really why we're doing it.
Got a question about the storage spaces themselves. I've seen some facilities similar to this where it's not just car storage, but also lounge facilities and bathrooms in each of the storage
Right.
units. Are you proposing anything of that nature? Or is
No.
it strictly car storage?
It's strictly car storage. Those are deeded, those are like a country clubs. They're more of a kind of a club, and that's not what this is. This is strictly storage of their vehicles, and nothing more. No repairs, there's no, mezzanines for parties or things like that.
All right, thank you.
Will there be, there'll be an electrical outlet in each?
Yeah, trickle charge outlet for the cars. There'll be some humidity control because that's what our customers will be looking for when they store their cars. We're not exactly sure what the mechanicals are going to be, but we try to control the humidity in these units.
Speaking of humidity, will be any water into the facility?
We're contemplating putting water to one end. We may put a set of restrooms as well.
I'm talking about in each garage. Is there going to be a water spigot?
Not planned, no.
Just a question then on, what is on the easement? Is that asphalt or?
Yeah, currently it's covered with the parking lot.
Okay.
The easement, yeah. And my understanding is a main storm sewer that runs, that handles the water from the park and traverses to the east.
Okay.
Yeah, just to mention for everyone, that pink area there is a major utility corridor for the whole north end of the industrial park. So there's very large storm and sanitary lines running through there. And this is probably a very elegant solution for what could be used for that space, because you can't be putting buildings on top of the,
And to move that would be,
and it would be very, very, very expensive for anyone to undertake moving those. So it's actually a nice fit.
Is this subdivision necessary for this project?
So
there a
that,
subdivision
that's
that's-
something that was requested by the applicant, and something that was brought up that we will look into and provide more feedback on as staff, is whether or not one other variation would be needed for code requirement that says that only one principal building is able to be on each lot. So that's something that we'll confirm with you guys as well. But aside from that, the subdivision would not be required.
Okay, so it was just requested by the applicant. That's not something that we are insisting upon to move forward.
Correct.
And just to clarify, as we're covering the easement, I appreciate that it's already come up. The other point I wanted to be clear on is you see this as people individually bringing their cars in. Will not be a semi coming back and forth with any, all right.
yeah. No, these will be people from your community, bordering communities that will have vehicles.
Any other questions or comments from the commissioners?
Overall, I would encourage you to move forward. I would also encourage you to clarify with staff what your intentions are for fencing.
Okay,
I'm still not quite clear on that, and that could be a little problematic,
we'll address that.
depending on the extent of fencing you're proposing. But otherwise, I think it works well with that space that's there.
Terrific. Thank you for your feedback. We appreciate it. We'll be back with you and have a full presentation when we present formally.
Great.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Would we get to that? Do you want to raise it? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's get through, we'll get through 6.
This nice rendering doesn't show any fencing at all.
Yeah,
I'm surprised.
I know.
All right.
And how does that work with the easement if you have to have access?
Okay, agenda item number 6.
See the keys.
Ms. Gable, if you'd like to present.
Yes.
Okay, so that was that.
All right, we still have one more agenda item before we get to number 7, obviously, so please allow us to proceed. Thank you. Agenda item number 6, public hearing, minor residential variation, 716 Rockland Avenue. Ms. Gable?
Yep. In order to construct an addition on their home at 716 Rockland Avenue, Andrew and Robert Basson are seeking variations from section 10-5-3 and 10-5-5 of the zoning regulations. Specifically, the new front porch is proposed to encroach approximately 2.5 feet or 8.3% into the required 30-foot front setback, and the new partial second story will exceed the daylight plane height restriction by 2.4 feet or approximately 13%. As these variation requests are considered minor, as they're less than 25%, the PCZBA has the authority to approve the requests, and the applicant is in attendance tonight to present the plans.
Okay. Before we get started, we'll just have you sworn in, please. So please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please identify yourself and please proceed.
Hi, good evening. My name's Robin Basson, and I am one of the homeowners, along with my husband Andrew, at 716 Rockland Avenue.
I'm Randy Pruitt. I'm the general contractor for the project.
So, as Clara just stated, we are here seeking 2 minor variances. And I just wanted to start off by saying we moved here to Lake Bluff 14 years ago, and we were drawn to this community instantly. We love Lake Bluff, and we are committed truly to preserving the culture and the homes and the community that drew us here in the first place. So when we first moved here and we moved to 716 Rockland, we had smaller kids, and we were hoping to be able to afford to do the home improvements that we needed to do to meet our family's growing needs. And now that we are able to afford a home renovation project, we are coming across some zoning ordinances that are where we are seeking some variance requests. And that is in the area of the front yard setback and the daylight plane ordinance. How do you want to proceed with going over what?
I can kind of take over and so Clara read off some of the proposed. So the request, as we've stated, is for the front yard setback and then the daylight plane, which is on the right side or the north side. We have some pictures later on in the presentation deck as well. The front yard is an 8% variance. For the front porch only, the house is not coming into the setback, just the front porch and into that setback. And then the daylight plane, I think the staff calculated it slightly different than I did. I had it calculated at 11 inches. They had it slightly more. But nonetheless, it is still less than the 25%. So, and that's on the, once again, on the right side or the north side. Next slide. So we're kind of addressing some of the standards for review. The front porch really is, as you will see from the design, is really kind of necessary from an aesthetic, and it's consistent, I think, as you know, probably better than I, as you drive around in the neighborhood, the front porches. And one of the first times I met with the Bassons, they said, you know, Lake Bluff is kind of a front porch living community. Look at other people nodding. And so that's kind of the impetus for us building this kind of very nice front porch, which really is kind of a major aesthetic portion of the design. And we believe it's a minor variance that really would have any or very negative or very little negative impact on the other neighborhood. In fact, perhaps add value. In the daylight plane, I think this is an important thing to notice. We didn't just decide to build the addition on the right side of the structure. We tried, they put me through the ringer on various different designs. And the house just really didn't lend itself to, the left side of the house is smaller than the right side of the house. And so when we tried to put the second story on the left side of the house, which wouldn't have created a daylight plane issue, it just did not provide the adequate square footage, and it just aesthetically just didn't look good. It just honestly did not look good. So after going back and forth several different times, we decided to ask for the variance and kind of do what we originally set out to do. And we did this after the Bassons actually talked to some of the neighbors to say, hey, before we go forward with this, you know, we wasted kind of our design time here. Are you guys? And I think they've gotten most, if not all, of their neighbors have been in support of this, and I think Robin can speak to that a little bit more. So that's kind of the facts and of how we arrived at the decision to ask for the variance on the daylight plane. Okay, next slide. Robin, you want to talk about the?
So as Randy stated, we really did our due diligence and went and spoke to many of our neighbors. And for the daylight plane ordinance, the people that are most directly impacted by it are the neighbors to the north of us, directly to the north. And they have written in with their support for the plans. And as Randy said, we tried to make the plans on the other side, and actually would have almost preferred that because it would have afforded us to have more separation between where we hope our kids' bedrooms will be and where ours will be. But it just doesn't allow us to have enough square footage to make the investment worthwhile with the smaller square footage of the second story. But back to the neighborhoods, I believe, 7 letters of support, and I heard one more maybe came in today, hopefully. So, and in terms of the front porch setback, we haven't heard any protests or dispute about that. As Randy mentioned, I mean, front porch living and kids playing in the front yard is really so the culture of Lake Bluff, and what I said earlier drew us to that.
And I think that was our first request too, when we were doing our building, was like, this is what we want as part of the community, is a front porch area where we can sit out, watch our kids, and be with our community.
And build community
Yeah.
amongst our neighbors and in our neighborhoods, so. About it. Do you want us to proceed with pictures of the plans, or do y'all have questions at this point?
Maybe just briefly go through the plans so we can visualize it. And
So, the existing house is, just flip back for 1 second, Clara.
Yep.
Thank you. The existing house is 34 and a half feet, zoning is 30 from the closest point, so the house footprint doesn't change. The existing front porch, which is actually a stoop, is actually only 33 feet from the front line, and the new modified would be 27.56. The front porch is open. It's not like it's a huge facade structure. So we believe it really does add to the streetscape and the presence of the home. And then we've talked much already about the second floor, with consideration was given to alternatives to eliminate the need for the variance, and really none of the alternatives really, either aesthetically or economically or practical use, really prevailed. Next slide, please. So this is current existing conditions, kind of the front of the house looking from the two sides, kind of giving you a perspective. So this bottom picture, that is the side where the daylight plane would be. That's the right side of the house. That's where the second story would be constructed. And the front porch is, no, that's good, Claire, thank you. So here's the drawing of the new structure, front porch on the right side. And then you see the dotted line there on the right side. That's the daylight plane line that's been drawn. And so it clips the top of the wall and a portion of the eave before it ultimately clears by the time it gets to the top of the ridge. So that's the front view. Front porch comes out where the front door is at, and then runs along the entire front portion of the home to the right. And that's just a view of the rear of the home, just so you see the kind of the whole view. Next slide. The bottom slide is that right side or north side, and the other slide is the top picture is the driveway side or the south side of that property. You can see the front porch in both instances. Existing conditions, you see the 36.56 feet, which is the current setback. Next slide, please. This is the proposed with the front porch drawn in that light blue color, and then the darker blue color showing the footprint of the second floor that's being added. We're also adding a garage in the back as well from a footprint perspective, but there's no variance issues with that. So that's it. That's the, I think, the material that was in the presentation, and obviously be happy to entertain any questions.
In the packet, it said you were more or less encroaching on the north side, and they were over the zone, what was zone for? Do you have a picture of that, of the relationship between your house and the house that it affects?
We didn't include that in the packet, so I don't have that to display today.
It's a pretty, I think that's like 5 5.5 feet to that north lot line, so it is pretty close, and the neighbor is probably 8 feet away, something like that.
Is that a two-story on the north side or one
On
story?
the north side, yes, sir. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that driving the neighborhood and everything, it looks like it's gonna be a lovely addition to it. The scale, the streetscape, you know, obviously you're not overbuilding for the neighborhood because there's all different sizes right there. So I think that will all be nice. I appreciate the thoroughness of the packet, and thank you for securing all the neighbors' comments, because that's always, I think, of interest to us to know, you know, if people are in favor or not in favor of it. So I would certainly be in favor of it.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Any other commissioners?
No, I have notes that are basically echoing what Deb said. I think this is a lovely packet. I think the proposal is really quite nice. It's working within the neighborhood. And I also very much appreciate the legwork and going out and contacting your neighbors. It's a very nice gesture, but it's important, something that we want to consider. So I think it looks wonderful. Good improvement.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Claire, can you put up a Google of the street? Google map or?
From the street view or from above?
Let's try the street view and see.
Okay.
And while she's getting that, I don't have any questions, and, you know, what you're proposing is very, very modest. You have very low ceiling height on the second floor. The two bedrooms up there are very modest in size. It's not like you're trying to create two huge bedrooms and unnecessarily creating you're lacking At first, when I first read the cover of the packet, I thought I might be concerned, but I'm not at all, given what I saw. Your overall project is way under on floor area, it's way under on building coverage, it's under on building height. So I'm very much in favor of granting the variance here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Mr.
No
Stoll?
objections from me.
Yeah, I noticed that you're well under on FAR also, which is very, very critical to me, and
Right.
I have no concerns either, but,
I just want to see the.
yeah, we're just waiting to get the visual.
You got it.
Thank you.
Should have probably taken a
I
picture
know,
beforehand.
I'm looking on my phone to see if I have.
We had it in that original street sign, but then we so bulky in the whole packet.
We do have a picture of the next door neighbor's house on
Oh,
the
here. Do
second
you wanna
to
see on my
last
phone?
page. but-
Oh, there.
Oh, here you go.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, and you're on the left, obviously. You guys going to be facing windows?
Excuse me?
You're facing windows between the two bedrooms, sets of bedrooms?
There will be windows facing north, yes.
Yeah, so your kids are going to have a good time with the kids next door if they're.
Well, you know, actually, when I designed that second floor, I actually positioned the windows to where they didn't line up with the neighbor's house. So I was very intentional with where I put the windows. Their master bedroom is gonna be on that first floor, and then the two bedrooms upstairs. So I was pretty intentional with where I put the windows for that reason, so.
And we're lucky that we like our neighbors and they like us, so. Yeah.
Well, I too agree that, yeah, I'm glad you're fixing it up rather than tearing it down. I think it adds to the character of the neighborhood, something old and something new at the same time. I've done that. And I too approve of the variance.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any other comments from the commissioners? I guess we'll close the public hearing and, oh, please.
Yes.
There-
Well, motion.
We have to
I'll
petition.
move to approve the requested relief as applied for.
Second.
Okay, please proceed.
Second?
Member Fisher?
Aye.
Member Miller?
Aye.
Member Russell? Member Sorensen?
Aye.
Member Toll?
Aye.
And Chair Peters?
Aye.
All right.
Motion carries. Next steps, Ms.
Next
Gable?
steps is that they are able to apply for their building permits
We
because
did a
this
phased
was,
approach, so we did an initial phase that allow us to get some work started in the back, and now we have a second phase that we'll be submitting this week.
yeah,
with
so
this approval,
this was
so.
something that you guys were able to approve as it is minor.
Excellent.
Great.
Good.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for your
much.
consideration.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
fun.
That's tough.
You paid all these people to come in today, right?
I'll just I'm gonna make this announcement really quick now, just so
Well,
people
before
can
we-
start.
Okay.
Yeah. For the next agenda item, we did this a little late, so I apologize, but we do have a sign-up sheet for speakers up here. If you want to sign up, we just ask that you do it quietly, up here. And Lauren, maybe you can help facilitate that and make sure there's a pen up there. We can pass it around as well, whatever is easiest.
Yeah, Ms. Gable, if you could introduce agenda item number 7, and then we'll give a few preliminary comments, and we'll get started.
Yes. So the Lake Bluff Park District submitted a zoning application regarding pickleball courts at Blair and Artesian Parks on March 26th. They are here to make a presentation regarding that application tonight. The Park District's sound study was received late last week, and the village's consultant has yet to review it. Therefore, the discussion on this matter will continue on to the May 15th PCZBA meeting agenda, but discussion can start tonight.
Yeah, our thought this evening, as Ms. Gable indicated, was that the petitioner will present, and then we'll allow the public to comment, or at least begin to comment, so to speak. The guidelines will be a limit of no more than 3 minutes per comment. Again, we're going to impress upon everybody to maintain decorum, and we'll make as much progress as we can, but it won't be concluded tonight.
Yes.
So, on behalf of the petitioner, and the other point before we get started is anyone who wants to testify, we have to swear you in. So if you anticipate or you're going to testify, please stand up, raise your right hand, and we'll swear you in.
Obviously, all the people in line.
Yeah. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, thank you. All right. Please identify yourself and please proceed, sir.
Yep. Good evening. My name is Scott Puma. It's P-U-M-A. I'm at the Ansel Glink Law Firm. I represent the Lake Bluff Park District. I'm here this evening with several members of our board. Jennifer Beeler, the president. Who else do I have? Paul Greenfield, Emily Lane, and Scott Weber are here. A couple people had some children activities that they couldn't be here, so otherwise I think we would have had the entire board. Also, John Beeler is the executive director. Jim Lakeman is here, and then we're here with Bob Unitich, who is our sound consultant, who is online, and Stephen Albert, who is our real estate appraisal expert, and he is here in person. So we're asking for pickleball to be a permitted use in both the Blair Park and Artesian Parks, and rather than me talk, I think it would be better to hear directly from President Jennifer Beeler, and she'll start us off here.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I think when we all serve on a board, we do it because we love Lake Bluff, but we also feel like we know our town pretty well. And I think when serving on a board, you realize there's a lot you don't know about your own village or about the Park District. And so I'd like to take this time to kind of walk through a history of pickleball that's been played in Lake Bluff for the last decade. What's changed with the quantity of the play? What steps we took as a Park District board to address our neighbors' concerns? How pickleball factors in financially with the Park District? And what can be done now with mitigation to serve the community and really to be good neighbors. What I'd like to do first is kind of walk you through who we are as a Park District and who we serve. We go outside the Lake Bluff borders. We serve Knollwood. We serve some parts of North Chicago. In total, we have over 10,000 residents that we serve. The Park District provides over 400 programs during a year, and those programs range for services, programs, activities for infants all the way up through seniors. Thank you. I always like this slide because this always educates me as well and edifies me as to what we have as a Park District. We have a fitness center in our recreation center and an after-school program. We have 4 paddle courts and a paddle hut. We have Ravine Park as part of the Park District, which is so unique. We have a sledding hill, an ice skating rink, and a warming hut. We have the Carolyn Getz wetlands, that we are stewards of those wetlands and partner with Lake Bluff Open Lands to be able to caretake on those. We have a preschool that I think is probably one of the best in this community. 12 different parks with playground equipment. We have 7 baseball diamonds, and again, we have community partners with the Lake Bluff Youth Baseball Association to keep those running and keep those active. We have Blair Park and Artesian Park with racket courts. We have the Blair Park Aquatic Facility. We have an 18-hole golf course and a clubhouse. And of course, I saved the best for last, Sunrise Beach and Bluff with the 2 shelters that are down at the beach. So a wide scale, large, diverse, but this is all part of our umbrella. And as always, we look toward our mission. As responsible stewards of the community resources, the district will enhance the community through recreational experiences in a fun, safe, and healthy environment. Give me just a moment before you toggle that. I grew up in a household that tennis was sacred. Arthur Ashe, Martina Navratilova, Jimmy Connors, I mean, those were sacred names in my household. I think you'll recognize Agassi, Roddick, McEnroe, and Chang as your introduction to pickleball. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's. Oops.
If it's not going to run, it's, no?
I don't know if
That's
it's
okay.
going to, unfortunately.
Let's just say it's a clip of these 4 playing pickleball. Obviously, we're all a little bit older. We have graduated from tennis onto pickleball, but McEnroe is still McEnroe with what he does. So you can go to the next slide. As I said, pickleball's been played here in Lake Bluff for over a decade. It started off in 2014 with one of the staff members saying to the rest of the staff and the board, we need to bring this program into Lake Bluff. And I'll really kind of start with Artesian Park because that's where it was originally played. The court lines for pickleball, which are different from tennis, were painted onto the Artesian Park courts. By 2016, the surface was a little rough on Artesian, so it was moved over to Blair Park because Artesian needed resurfacing. And for right now, Artesian has temporary play. It's got movable nets, portable nets, but it's predominantly tennis over in Artesian. On the Blair Park side, pickleball has been played outside in Blair Park since 2015. The play that's gone on there has included drills, open play, and workshops. The courts were resurfaced for repairs, adding those painted court lines, replacing 1 tennis court with 4 pickleball courts. So you get some idea as to how it's played. And it can take that other tennis court, convert it to 2 more courts for pickleball. What I've included up there, and I have a sheaf of papers here, showing the programming that we have had, the advertising that we've had, work orders, everything else that we've had going back to 2015 and beyond. But this is from 2017 showing come and play at Blair Park. You'll see open play up there, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and a tournament that was held in 2017 over at Blair Park as well. Now, what happened in 2021 was as pickleball started to become more popular, we knew that we had to resurface Blair. It needed the care and conditioning at that time. And we are very fortunate because we have our 501c3 foundation, the Friends of Lake Bluff Parks. We said we had money to be able to resurface, but the Friends said we will donate half of it. We will pledge half of that. So what I included up there was a segment from our Tri-Board newsletter, which includes the Park District, the school board and the library and, and the village, and that shows that we were promoting the fact that those courts were resurfaced at that time. I think it's important then to kind of talk a little bit about, since the play was there and it was existing back to 2015, what changed? COVID changed a lot of things. And so I put out these pickleball statistics so that you see from the APP, from the Association of Pickleball Professionals back from 2022, that number at the top that had jumped almost double from 2021 to 2022 is startling. Play has increased 223.5%. We all wish our investments had that kind of growth, but pickleball, if anyone was able to predict that, it's incredible. Back in 2022, almost 14,000 courts throughout the US, predominantly heavy in the Washington State area. That's where pickleball really started, but a lot of the southern states have those outdoor courts. And the pickleball paddle market, and what I put up there is what's called a quiet paddle, an owl paddle. That is going to grow 7.7% compounded annual growth rate up till 2028. It's a great market to be in if you are a pickleball paddle manufacturer. And the last thing on the bottom is not a pizza, it's Chicago Slice. We now have our own professional pickleball team here in Chicago. So keeping on with these pickleball statistics and what changed with there's this huge surge in pickleball. It's now the third most popular sport after biking and after running. And I included up there a picture of the newcomers because it used to be pickleball was played and they thought by people of my hair color, supposedly. But now it's not just the over 55. It's a huge growth now for the over 30 category. Kids are learning it in schools. Kids are playing it in college. And the newcomers who are coming into our community booked the Blair Courts to have membership meetings, or excuse me, to have an activity for pickleball. One of the things I'm just going to talk about really briefly is just the social aspect of pickleball. And I'm not going to ask anybody to show hands if you've played before, but I'm going to pick on you, Ms. Gable. If you and I played tennis, we would go out and we would have games, set, match. Okay, we can invite Member Russell, we can invite Chair Peters with us, we would have a foursome, we'd play tennis. Pickleball's a very different game in that if we played singles, it would be very competitive. But it's more fun when you have four people. But when you hear the term open play, that means that you have all your courts filled with different people. And if you and I, Ms. Gable, won our match, we'd split, we'd play with two other people. The losers would split, they'd play with two other people. So think about it that way, that when you have all 6 courts at Blair filled, okay, 4 people per court, the combination of people that you're playing with, the combination of people that you're meeting, that's why pickleball changed so much, because after COVID, we were all starved for some sort of contact, some sort of interaction. And so that surge, that amount of growth in that play, because of the way pickleball is played, that really changed the volume of play that took place at Blair. Okay, and you hear about the pickleball community. It's because these people connected, made friends, made acquaintances by meeting up at Blair Park. So what happened then, and we'll go to the next slide if we could, is our neighbors. Because you have not just 24 people playing, you probably have 30 plus people who are sitting and waiting to play, rotating in. They're sitting and having an iced tea afterwards. They go over to the paddle hut or they'll go over to the golf course and have something afterwards, but increase the noise, obviously, at Blair. And so what we did is our neighbors talked to us and told us, quite frankly, the noise was there. We met with our neighbors as a Park District Board, informally at first, to be able to say, what can we do? And the first question was, can you change the hours? And that made sense, because playing very early in the morning, playing later at night, that would interfere with our neighbors. And we have 8 neighborhood homes that kind of circle around Blair Park on Washington Street and on Green Bay Road. We also took a survey of the town And we had people who are pickleball players, people who were not as enthusiastic about pickleball, but we had a very large response. 62% said that they wanted to play at Blair Park. We took then substantial steps as a Park District Board to say, if the noise, if the sound of pickleball is infringing on our neighbors, what are we going to do? And there are mitigation steps that we started to put into place to say, can we put up sound panels? Can we do more to restrict the hours to make sure that we are good neighbors as a Park District with the neighbors that we have around us? And so what we have right now, I'll say, is a result of what's happened with our interaction with the village. And we did have several meetings that were attended by community members, and they were very vocal as to what they felt was appropriate. And so right now at Blair Park, we only have play on Tuesday, on Wednesday, and on Thursday from 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. There is no weekend open play, and it's programs only that can be taught at Blair Park. At Artesian Park, as I said, we have the movable nets, and it follows the tennis court hours. I will say that for a park district, it's not typical to have a locked asset. Our beach is open. It's open to residents. It's free to residents. Obviously, we charge for non-residents to use the beach. But whether you're a resident or non-resident, you can use our tennis courts. You can use the playgrounds. You can use the baseball fields. Having a locked pickleball court is not typical. The next slide, okay. The community park is a Park District term, but I think it's an important one for people to know. If you think about Sanctuary Park, think about West Park, even think about Artesian, those are neighborhood parks. Blair Park is a hub. It's a campus. It's different from other parks. It's a community park because it accommodates a wide range of recreational activities to serve the community. So that's why I put this up here. Imagine in your mind exactly where Blair Park is. We've got the elementary school across the street. It's a unique opportunity because those kids are able to walk across the street to come to the Park District for the ARC program. They're able to play tennis. They're able to play golf. They're able to play different activities as part of their after-school program. We've got the summer camps with all the kids and all the noise that has first thing in the morning and at the end of the camp day. We have Blair Park Pool. That's going to be servicing the camps, going to be servicing the community, and then with all the swim meets that are loud and late at night. And then also, Blair Park is used for community activities. We hold Bluffinia festivals over there. Fireworks for the village have been happening annually. We have the egg hunts, we have trunk or treat, and we have the paddle courts that, as you are well aware, do have lights and they have music playing. So Blair Park, I'm going to say, is very unique because it is a noisy park. It's supposed to be, because that's where people go to use it. Okay? So with that kind of background, what I want to talk about next is the budget and where pickleball and racket sports fall into the Park District. We are small but mighty. I keep looking at this and I say 6.4 million. That's what we have for revenue for the Park District. 55% comes from taxes, 45% comes from programs. Think back to that slide that had all those different assets. All of those have to be maintained. We have to be stewards of those assets with 6.4 million. Our 14 full-time staff members are phenomenal because they're able to set those programs and administrate that budget to make sure that everything is taken care of. We swell to 103 part-time winter members and 260 summer part-time members. That's a huge growth. I looked up at the top and I put them as the Lake Bluff Jewels. These are our non-revenue producers that we wouldn't have it any other way. We lose $161,000 by maintaining Sunrise Beach. Why? Because we don't charge our residents. Other communities like Glencoe and some others do. But we want to have this as an asset for our residents to use, to maintain, to groom, to have security down there, to keep those shelters beautiful and usable for everybody. And the second one on there is Blair Park Pool. We lose over $60,000 a year to operate the pool. Again, would we have it any other way? No, because people treasure that as an asset. You won't find the golf course up there anymore. It's not in the red anymore. It's a moneymaker now for the Park District. But finally, we'll go down to the racket programs. We have a thriving racket program with the Park District. It includes tennis, paddle, and pickleball. $101,000 a year is what it brings out in for us. The number that I have up there for pickleball, which is what we're anticipating for 2024, $36,000 revenue, $13,000 in expenses, a net of $22,000. So if we have $22,000, even the $36,000, that's 0.5% of our $6.4 million budget. So pickleball is a very, very small revenue component, but what it offers to the community is a large ticket item. When we were offering memberships, which was in 2023, is that right? Okay. Because of Blair Park, because of the unique aspect of Blair Park and what we had to offer there, we offered pickleball memberships. The membership was $100. You could reserve court time at Blair Park. You could have discounted use for the paddle hut during the summer, and another great bargain in Lake Bluff, $5 to play indoors for 3 to 4 hours during the winter over at the rec center. We had a large number of people, I'm going to say about 60 or 70, I'm looking toward Jim, about 60 or 70 people signed up for his memberships. When we had to close down the courts, we refunded better than half of those. Through the staff, we still offer programming. We offer intro to pickle. We offer some drills. But again, those are done at Blair Park and done under locked courts. So once your drill is done, once your program is done, you must leave the court. You cannot stay and play afterwards, and it's not open to come back at a later time. Staff came up with a number of great ideas of other ways that they can incorporate programming. League play, community party rentals. We did have some people approach us on that last year. Because of the way that we have to operate the courts at this point, those are not going to come to fruition. So I'm going to say that 36 number that we had for possible revenue for 2024 is really not feasible at this time because of the hours that we have for operation. There was a lot of discussion as to why can't we build another court? And this especially takes a look at how we compare to other North Shore communities. We have a treasure trust. We have a richness of assets. But we've got 10,000 residents. We have revenue of $6.4 million. And we have 4 to 6 pickleball courts at Blair. We have 6 tennis courts over at Artesian. And we have 4 paddle courts. I'm going to say the closest we come to, look at Wilmette by way of comparison. They have almost 3 times the number of residents. They have 4 times the amount of revenue that we have. They have 6 pickleball courts. They have 11 tennis courts. They have 8 paddle courts. They can sustain those kinds of assets. They've got a larger revenue base. The number that we have down at the bottom, the anticipated pickleball revenue, and Lake Forest, as you are probably aware, is opening up Deer Path. May 4th, I think, is their opening of their 8 pickleball courts. It's going to change things, we think, for the Park District because it's going to disperse the number of people that are currently using our courts or want to use our courts, and they'll go over to Lake Forest. People are already starting to disperse. When we had to lock down the courts, people went to Eau Plaine, people went to Libertyville, pickleball people will go anywhere they can find a good game and find good players. And so we really lost a lot of people in that pickleball community at that time. But we know that Lake Forest will draw a lot of people. So when people talk about, well, why can't you just find a new place to build? Why can't you just build a new pickleball court that's going to be not in that corridor that's near our residents? We had a study done many years ago that said we have so many assets, we should not build another asset to maintain. Again, that 6.4 can only go so far. And another focus this year is really where we want to put our money as a board. We made a commitment to fund the Blair Park pool repairs. We were very fortunate. We are the recipient of an OSLAD grant. It's a $600,000 matching grant. With what has happened with the referendum and the high school, knowing that your taxes are going to be increased because of the referendum, with knowing with stormwater management, with the increase that you are going to be paying because of stormwater management, we as a Park District Board made that commitment to say, we don't want to further tax our community members. We are going to be funding this $2.2 million repair internally. This grant is going to be a great way to do this. We're going to do that within this year, and 2025 is the 100-year anniversary of the Park District, and that's when we're going to have the repairs done. That's, I'm going to knock on wood, but they were hoping that everything falls in line that way. So our money, our time, is really going to be focused on Blair Pool. Do we have money to do pickleball mitigation? Yes, we do. Do we have an additional $200,000, $250,000 to build a new pickleball court? That would be taking money away from the pool. Next slide. I think one of the things we need to do, though, is really learn from other communities. And we have had a number of commissioners go to different communities, and we're very fortunate in that our executive director, John Beeler, has a good relationship with other executive directors. Here are photos from Flick Park in Glenview. I was the one who went there and took those photos, and I talked to their board president as well. They had a pickleball study that was done by Thunder, which is, I believe, the group that the village would like to use to do their sound study. Their sound study, I do have copies of it, found ways to be able to say, this house, that house that's over there, about 60 feet away from those pickleball courts. But they were able to propose a way to say there can be sound mitigation by that material that's put up in those fences. Those are acoustic panels, and also controlling the hours of play to be able to have that sound level reduced so that they are good neighbors within the Glenview community. And so we look toward them as an example of a way to say, it can be done. You can have a pickleball court that is in a community area, but be able to have play and have it successful for everybody all around. So, in total, as I said, we serve over 10,000 residents. We like to think that it's not just the village of Lake Bluff and the other residents that we have from Knollwood and from North Chicago, but we're an open community for so many other people from Highland Park, from Libertyville, from Mundelein. We offer quality programming, but we understand we're not the only ones. There are other options. People can go to other places to play pickleball. We're not the only source. We have a lot of people who are residents or who just like this community and they like to come here because of the relationships that they've developed. Blair Park is a unique park. It will be a high-level park, a high-use park, simply because of how it is, but that's what makes us unique. That's what makes us unique as Lake Bluff, because we have that kind of campus mentality. And finally, we're the stewards of many assets, and we must be fiscally responsible. That's why we are your board members. That's what we're supposed to do. Two other things that I'd like to address, and this will come up as well with the other speakers, our other experts. We will talk about the sound study, and that'll be the next expert that we'll have, as well as the concern about the value of the homes. And I know that's been brought up, and we have another expert who's going to be speaking tonight who has done an impact study as to what has happened and how the houses, around the Blair Park maintain their value in comparison, especially with sales of homes in other pickleball communities. So I'll ask, does anybody have any questions at this point?
I guess preliminarily, Jennifer, you talked about mitigation and what they do in Glenview. So what's our mitigation plan?
Okay. I think it's a good question, and I think I'd like to turn it over to Bob Unitech in order to be able to speak to that, because he, with his sound study, also has this mitigation proposal as to what we can do as a community. It is included in our packet, I believe, but by putting up sound panels, and we can put them up at various heights. Right now, our fencing is 9 feet high. We understand because of where the pickleball courts are located and because where our neighbors are located, we could also extend those fences and go higher to put those panels up higher. But we could also control the hours and also control the kind of rackets that are being used within the park district. All of those help decrease the sound of pickleball, but I think Bob really is our expert on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I will do this, and you do have Mr. Unitech online?
Yes.
Okay. I do have a quick bio for him, and I will lead in with that. He is the founder of the Pickleball Acoustics consulting firm known as Pickleball Sound Mitigation, which is based in Pittsburgh. The firm has 5 acoustic engineers and an acoustics lab where it has specialized test equipment and chambers for testing pickleball equipment, including sound barriers. Mr. Unitech is a graduate of Carnegie Mellon University with a degree in electrical engineering, and he's worked extensively on pickleball sound since 2015 when he took up the sport, and his community needed to solve the growing problem of sound with this sport. His firm is nationally recognized on the topic. He's been quoted by the Wall Street Journal, by the New York Times about pickleball sound. Along with his colleague, Dr. Barry Wireman, Mr. Unitech has authored 3 seminal papers on the topic that were presented at an acoustics conference, and his firm has worked with over 200 clients across the country, seeking methods of minimizing the impact of pickleball sound, including our local communities of the Skokie Country Club, the Valley Low HOA in Glencoe, and others.
So Jennifer, are you ready for me to speak?
I am ready for you, Bob. Thank you.
Oh, Bob,
Confirm.
yeah, were you sworn in, Bob?
No, how will I do that?
Well, stand up, raise your right hand, and we'll swear you in. And we'll
I'll be
trust that
happy to
you-
do that. I'm doing
Yeah.
that now.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as Jennifer explained, my company specializes in pickleball sound mitigation. I did get involved in 2015 in a community in Florida where I tried to retire to. And we had 4 pickleball courts, and the sport was growing quickly. Starting at about 2013, grew very quickly. We have 3,400 front doors in our HOA, and we converted 2 tennis courts to pickleball. And after a year or two, 2013, 2014, 2015, it got busier and busier, and the neighbors began to complain about it. And
recording in progress.
And I got involved because the other people in the pickleball club board, or the people on the board, were not technical, and they needed someone to understand the technical issues. They did hire an outside consulting firm. I worked closely with them, and we studied different ways to reduce the sound levels. And we did a lot of analysis of sound barriers and paddles and balls. Pickleball is played with a paddle, 16 or 17 inches long, and a hard plastic ball. It's played in a court about the same size as platform tennis. And I used to play platform tennis in Pittsburgh, and a lot of people come out of platform tennis or tennis and find they can pick up pickleball in a matter of a few hours, and suddenly they're able to play this game on this small court and get good exercise. It spread from Florida to the people who would leave Florida in the summer and go north all over America to play more pickleball. And as that happened, many Florida folks, winter people, would go north and find they had similar problems cropping up in pickleball sound. So for several years, I was simply helping people around the country look for ways to reduce the sound level. You know, the obvious way is to move the court somewhere else, push them far away. Well, the question is, how far away do they need to be? So you need to understand the physics of it. And this is all about physics. And sound is interesting because we all can hear, most of us can hear, and we all have a feeling for what's an annoying sound level. So I've studied that a lot, and I had several other retired engineers in Florida, one with a PhD in acoustics from Penn State, inquire about joining me on a team to understand the problem and to analyze it, and to work very closely with manufacturers of paddles, manufacturers of balls, and with the national pickleball governing body, which is called USA Pickleball, because they were making an effort to solve sound problems around the country. The latest figures I saw were that 30-some million people play on some regular basis, and 8 million or so people are addicted to it. They play a lot. And I expect that to continue to grow. During COVID, it did grow very rapidly, and that caused some of the sound problems that we're now facing around the country. In many places, including my own in Florida, communities simply converted tennis courts, often unused tennis courts, to pickleball, and it created a problem. So we began to work with communities, hopefully, and USA Pickleball has tried to propagate this idea. USA Pickleball has 2,000 ambassadors, and they try to go to their own communities and suggest before courts are converted that people take a look at the spacing, the sound levels, the background noise levels, and look for ways to reduce the sound levels. And as we heard Jennifer say, lighting and playing at night, the time you play, this could be a problem, as it sometimes is for platform tennis as well. And so we've worked with a number of communities, including some around Chicago, and I get to Chicago frequently because I have 6 grandchildren in Chicago. And by the way, one is 10 years old and went with me to a national tournament and played and won a bronze medal. So it's like the sport is great from people from 8 years old to, I used to say 80, but really it's closer to 90. People 8 to 90 can play the sport. So we look for ways to solve the problem. And from a physics standpoint, and by the way, it's hard to force people to use particular paddles and balls. There are quieter paddles and balls, and I encourage their use. And we are fortunate that as the sport evolves, the product is becoming more sophisticated. And instead of the simple plywood paddles of the 1970s and 80s, we've moved first to fiberglass face paddles and now carbon face fiber paddles that provide much more spin and much more grip. And one advantage of that is it reduces the sound level. It also reduces the pitch, the tone. One problem with pickleball compared to other sports is the pitch is relatively high. A tennis ball has a pitch in the area of under 500 hertz. It's down below musical note C4. It's kind of a low thump. Where pickleball is more in the range of 1,000 to 2,000 hertz. Unfortunately, that's where human hearing is optimized, and humans like to be able to hear in that range, and so they're annoyed by sounds in that range. That's why smoke detectors and backup beepers on vehicles are in that same range, because it's meant to annoy people. So we are finding, though, that there's equipment, pickleball paddles and balls, and equipment that will produce a lower pitch, and that's quite effective, and I encourage that. But it's hard to enforce, because if you decide to take up pickleball this week, you might simply go on the line and on Amazon and buy an inexpensive, even a fiberglass, even a wooden paddle is still available. And you're not sure you're going to play the sport, so you can buy a wooden paddle for under $20 and try the sport. Unfortunately, those are allowed. But pros and high-level players typically have moved to quieter, softer face paddles, so they get more spin, and that's the trend, and I see that happening. There are some very quiet paddles now. Someone mentioned the name Owl. Owl is a company that's specialized in trying to produce a quiet paddle. It actually has a felt face, very much like the felt on a pool table, and that's been very effective. But of course, it might be hard to enforce that. I do have one community that bought 50 Owl paddles, and every person playing on a particular court must use a felt face paddle. But I'm not proposing that, because that's sort of an extreme step. What we try to do is find a way to block the line of sight view from the hitter, the person hitting a pickleball, to the listener, people in homes, in their yard, in second floor rooms, and so forth. And that's the approach that we took in Blair Park and in Lake Bluff. We were asked to look at this first last year at Lake Bluff, and we were told the fence was 9 feet high. We have a very sophisticated software program that simulates this, and we can place a sound source any place on the court, produce sound levels. All that is explained in detail in our report. I encourage you to page through the report, look at the photographs, and there's a little thermometer in there that shows you sound levels. What it says is that you're probably listening right now to my voice somewhere in the 60-some decibel range, because that's the nice, comfortable range for sound. If you're in a noisy restaurant, you're bothered by it, it might be in the 70 decibel range, and it's really quite annoying to you, 70-some decibels. And if you go into a library, the background noise level in a library is often in the 40-some decibel range. Background noise level varies constantly, and it varies everywhere. In my own yard, in my home in Pittsburgh, on my backyard, I typically measure 45 or 46 decibels of background noise level. I'm about 2 miles from a little town. If I go to the side of my house, I measure about 42 or 43 because my home blocks the view of that town. So if you can block the view of the path that sound will travel, you can reduce the sound level. So not to go into too much detail, I will summarize my recommendations. At Blair Park, where the property lines are very close and you're trying to bring those sound levels down. And by the way, to identify what level we're trying to bring them down to is not a trivial problem. What we found is ordinances are written in all sorts of ways all over the country. And often they take pieces of other ordinances, a county ordinance, a state ordinance, and they fabricate a new ordinance, and they often leave behind some pieces. Your ordinance is kind of that way in that it has a sophisticated chart of levels of sound that are deemed to be acceptable at different pitch, at different tones. And then it goes in to recommend a way to measure that, which doesn't do that at all. It simply averages up all the sound power and says to use this kind of meter, operate it a certain way. And that sort of meter just averages the overall sound present, not the individual pitch. So I can't look at your ordinance and say it's going to comply or not comply, but I can look at other things. There's an American National Standards Institute recommendation of 55 dBA for residential areas. And that's a pretty good number because I don't have, and you're aware that I don't have background noise level in your neighborhood. Now, I did go to Skokie Country Club, and near their platform tennis courts, they want to put in some pickleball courts, and we did measure background noise not far from you. And I've been at many other courts where I've measured background noise and places to measure background noise. And I will say background noise typically is in the 40s, except for when there's something going on, like wind or recreational program. Then it's often in the 50s and 60s. When a car goes by or a motorcycle goes by, it bumps up. So when I think of background noise, I think of sort of two numbers. How low does it get? And often it's in the low mid 40s. And what's the average number of background noise? While you're trying to run a measurement of background noise, an airplane might go over, a fire truck might go by. Typically, when I do some averaging noise, I get something in the mid 50s. And that's where the ANSI standard, American National Standards Institute, of 55. And in our experience, if you can drive the sound levels of pickleball for hard hits, and our computer is predicting 3 sigma, very low percentage of time, that is all the hits will be below this level, except very rare hits where some very strong person or some very unusual paddle gets hit, and you'll have some hit above this. But typically, we can measure 70 decibels at 100 feet. And it's physics. When you double the distance, the sound continues to propagate away. And at twice the distance, you have 4 times the areas. You have 1/4 the power, which is 6 decibels. It's simple math. At 100 feet, you typically get 70 decibels. At 200 feet, you usually get 64. At 400 feet, 58. It goes just like that. And so our computer program does that for us in all directions at once, and it adds color graphics, and that's right in the report that we issued. The essence of our recommendations, though, is to block the sound path. When we tried to use a 9-foot barrier at Blair Park, well, it blocked the sound, especially at lower levels, somewhat, but it did not bring it down below the ANSI recommended standards. And so we needed to go higher. We went to 10 feet, 12 feet, and 14 feet. Now, I have a community here in Florida we're working with that is very much like this. They're trying to add pickleball to a park, and they have homes right across the street, and they're deciding to go with the highway wall that's 20 feet high because they're really intent on using this space. A 20-foot wall, you're used to seeing those. If you drive up and down 90 and 94, I suspect there's sections of that that have 20-foot concrete highway walls. I think you don't need that at Blair Park or Artesian Park. What we did find was when we got to about the 12-foot level, numbers got very into that range in the 50s. When we went, because Blair Park is a little closer to homes, we had to go to 14 feet to get those levels really down to close to what our recommendations are. At Artesian Park, you have a greater spacing because you have 3 tennis courts. Tennis courts are usually 60 feet wide by 120 feet long. You have 3 of those courts, so you have 180 feet, and then you have a parking lot, so you're about 250 feet from homes. It did not need as much attenuation. And my report does get into using quieter equipment since that's where the sport is going, and it's worth considering. And so I, in the recommendation, said if you could find a way to enforce quieter equipment, 10-foot barriers at Artesian would work, and 12-foot barriers at Blair would work. They would bring the sound levels down into the low 50s. If you felt you could not enforce quieter equipment, you had to let people use whatever equipment, running the risk that very loud equipment, the original pickleball paddles and things would show up, then you need about 2 feet higher barriers. Every time you raise that barrier another foot or 2 higher, you knock the sound level down several decibels. Every time you try to go to quieter paddles, you can shave off the paddles from the list that are the loudest ones. And so by combination of those things and your idea of limiting the hours, in our courts in Florida, people go to bed early here in my community in Florida. It's an older community, so we can only play from 8 in the morning till 6 in the evening. 6 in the evening, people go out into their backyards and they want to not hear anything but the birds chirping and the distant road noise. So we have decided on 6 in the evening. We're right now trying to expand that by going to a little quieter paddle. But the essence of this is sound barriers work. Sound barriers are typically made of mass-loaded vinyl. You need something heavy to do this. Concrete works, but it's expensive. It takes foundations, and perhaps it's ugly. But you can hang things on existing fencing or put up new fencing. In some communities, we recommend absorbing sound barriers in case you have homes in the other direction. Because what I will say about mass-loaded vinyl sound barriers, like were in the photos that you just saw, is that they're highly reflective. The sound hits the barrier, it doesn't go through the barrier, less than 1% goes through, 99% is reflected back, it goes in the other direction. So you're really sending the sound somewhere else. In our community in Florida, we added a layer of fiberglass to those panels, a little more expensive, a little more fragile, but it stopped the echo from going to other neighbors in another direction. I don't see that needed at Blair Park or Artesian. I think you have you can reflect the sound basically to the west at both locations, and I think you can bring the sound level down into the 50-some decibel range with confidence by installing panels at 12 feet high or 14 feet high. If it's not unreasonable to go 14 feet high, I recognize that's relatively high for chain link fence. That would be a worthwhile step at Blair to try to bring the noise down as much as possible. And it would be 10 to 12 feet high at Artesian. If you want to have no control, no say in the use of what equipment gets used there, and 12-foot chain link fence. You can go to Home Depot and readily buy it, relatively easy to put up. I've seen a lot of 12-foot barriers, and I recommend that. So that's the essence of our recommendations. We recommend very similar kind of solutions all over the country, including other places in Illinois. At Skokie Country Club, I recommended particular barriers very much like this right next to their platform tennis courts. You have platform tennis at Artesian as well, and those courts will act as a buffer, by the way, to the west. They'll reduce the sound level to the west, but they don't help you really to the east. So that's the essence of my recommendations. I would be pleased to get into a discussion of metrics and averaging. I will say this, that if you have more players, it brings up the average noise level, but it does not change the sound of the individual hits. When a person hits a ball, that hit lasts about 20 milliseconds. You do not have the case hardly ever, can't say never, hardly ever, where two players are hitting a ball of the same distance from you at exactly the same time. There are always some milliseconds or seconds or more than that apart. And so what happens when you have more courts is you have more hits per minute or more hits per hour, but the individual noise level doesn't go up. The average noise level goes up. And I measure this myself, that the average noise level will go up several decibels for multiple courts as opposed to a single court. So I'll be pleased to try to get into more detail of some of those things and tell you more about the hardware or the measurements, or to try to answer whatever questions you might have for me.
Can I ask him a question?
No, not at this time, ma'am.
Not at this time, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Any questions from the commissioners for Bob?
I do have a question. I'm looking at page 16 of the report. I'll let you turn to that. Just a point of clarification and also a question. In this particular diagram, it's the colored diagram. It shows evidently the orange, I believe, is that above 50 decibels? Is that right?
You see the little bar in the left-hand side, bottom left, that shows you.
Okay, 55 and above. Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks like the orange in this diagram goes out of the neighborhood. Do you have any recollection of where that orange actually stops? Because it clearly goes across Green Bay Road. Looks like it would probably go to the school.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know where 55 decibel stops?
Well, let me say that every time you double the distance, the numbers will drop 6 decibels. Those colors, they're in 5 decibel blocks. So if you doubled any of the distances, you'd be like 6 decibels lower. So it would be a different color, if that's a reasonable answer for you.
Okay. Do you have the ability to zoom out so that we can actually see where?
Yeah,
where that
I
is?
absolutely do. And I don't have that software running in front of me. I just have the screen grab that's posted there. I could actually bring the software up. We could change the sound barriers in real time. And if you wanted me to take the 5 minutes to do that, I could probably do that.
Okay, I think that would be helpful. And just a point of clarification, this particular diagram is that, it says the text underneath it is predicted sound levels with 12-foot high barriers on 3 sides. Does that pertain to this particular diagram? I was a little confused of whether that's for this graphic or the next page.
It's the next page.
Okay, so this one would be for no sound mitigation at all.
I think that's right. Well, that's on the 9-foot fence. Yes, and I'm sorry, but you're right. The text is above it. If we add mass-loaded vinyl barrier to 3 sides, it's on page 15 of the existing 9-foot fence. We reduce the sound level as shown on the next plot. And then next plot is the plot you're talking about. So that's using the 9-foot barrier. In fact, you can see in the diagram where it says 2.7 meters, it wraps around the court. That is the sound barrier. And then there's a little plus sign on the pickleball court. That's the sound source. And I moved that sound barrier around, and I moved the source around to find the maximum level at distant points. But the diagram actually shows the height of the barriers in meters.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
I do want to remind the committee as well, and I don't know, Clara, with your, or Ms. Gable, with your computer abilities, we do have those arborvitae that are surrounding Blair Park, those courts. So were the level of the chain link fence to be raised, we still have those arborvitae that are old growth that cover that area. So aesthetically, from the view of the neighbors, they would not see that raised chain link fence.
Yeah, look, let me add a comment about vegetation and plants. Of course, I have no knowledge of that here. I don't have local photographs. Usually, if you could block the line of sight view with thick vegetation, you'll get about 4 decibels or so further reduction. So if you added a lot of landscaping, or let's say some of these homes have high hedges, the numbers will be about 4 decibels lower if you're really blocking the line of sight view. But I hesitate to put that in because, say, someone could take the vegetation out, and or perhaps it will lose its leaves in the winter. So this is all assuming that there's no vegetation, but in reality, there's always some vegetation there, some other structures. Any little berm would slightly reduce the sound levels. This is making the assumption that it's quite level terrain.
And the other thing I'll bring into, again, in speaking with Glenview, with Flick Park, and their installation of their barriers, they said that actually it was the pickleball players who were complaining because of exactly what Bob had mentioned. The sound is being bounced right back into the court rather than going out toward the homes. So the pickleball players were hearing their reverb, so to speak, with their play.
Bob, I notice there's a demarcation between first floor and second floor, obviously. And I'm looking at page 19. First floor, 53 decibels. Second floor, 58 decibels.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's all the ones that are very close to the homes are, I think, 4.7 meters off the ground. The ones along the property line are 1.5 meters off the ground. And certainly as you go higher, the barrier is less effective, especially if it's a low barrier. And in those at the second floor windows, if the windows were open, you could get sounds at those levels in those bedrooms. That is true.
Oh, if the windows are open.
Yeah, if the windows are closed, typically, in Illinois, you probably have double pane windows. They're about 20 decibel drops. If you close the windows or close them almost all the way, it becomes a percentage of how open is it. If a wide open window slid all the way up in the middle of summer, you let most of that sound in. When you close the window, it probably drops at 20 decibels. And if you open the window an inch or so, it's somewhere in between.
And at most of the facilities that you've consulted with, has there been an integration of both sound barriers and then the technology changes?
Well, in gated communities in Florida, they've all adopted quieter paddles and balls because they can enforce that. In our own community, the HOA has made it clear that if we can't enforce that, the club can't enforce that, that we'll lose the rights to the courts. And so we have loaner paddles and we have sleeves of the slightly quieter balls, and we do enforce that quite effectively. And most of the players then understand that right away. It's usually at Easter time when we have the biggest problem because we get a lot of guests down here for Easter break. They bring paddles down from up north and we have to go hand out our loaners. In a community like this, we have public communities that are really making an effort. There's a community in Laguna Beach, California that really is trying to enforce this on public courts. And they went out and bought 50 owl paddles. Because that one paddle is 10 decibels quieter than these numbers. If you get everybody to go with the owl, that's fine. But first of all, they're $150, which, it pales in comparison to golf or many other sports. But pickleball, that's one reason so many people play pickleball. It's an inexpensive sport. But yeah, replacement paddles, have a cost. There is an outfit that makes sleeves that slide over a paddle. And one community in Carlsbad, California, requires either the owl paddle or this sleeve, and it's a public court and we have one in Ojai, California, just like this. Public court, it has a keyed gate. And to get in there, you have to have the code, which means you're agreeing to use quieter equipment on those courts. And you really can't get in if you're just driving by and you stop. You can't get into the courts unless you go into the city hall of Ojai, California, and ask for a loaner paddle unless you can show them you have a quieter paddle. So I appreciate there's some difficulty in that, but it is the trend. And if you put up signs and get people to buy into the ideas, you know, pickleball players will sometimes seem insensitive to this. But in general, once pickleball players know there's a problem and they know they can really improve it, reduce the sound level by buying a higher quality paddle that might change their game in a positive way, I see them adopting that. So it's generally pretty well received, except they have to go spend $150 or $200 each.
And my understanding, Bob, is that the village has retained their own consultant. I don't believe he or she has completed their review and report yet. It might be beneficial from our perspective if you're available at our next meeting also to perhaps address some additional questions after we've had an opportunity to review the results of the village's consultant.
And I think I heard that date was May 15th.
That's correct, I believe.
Yeah,
Again,
I think I can do that.
Bob's,
There are some consultants that specialize in naysaying. You know, unfortunately, in acoustics, there are a lot of different metrics and a lot of different opinions. So, you know, I had to be in this battle before of one consultant hired to oppose pickleball and another hired to. And I've been in a position where I'm opposing it for somebody overlooking a court. But I'll be pleased to try to attend a meeting like this and discuss it with another consultant and to talk about all the mitigation steps. But I don't think anybody will say that a barrier won't help, and a barrier will knock it down. A 12-foot high barrier will knock it down 10 to 14 decibels, which is a substantial reduction in sound, regardless of how you happen to choose to measure that sound.
No, thank you very much.
Bob Skepium, the attorney for the Park District. Your recommendation is the 14 feet at Blair Park, correct?
I think if you find, I recommended that someplace in Florida, and they said it'll be an extra $70,000, but Florida has sandy soil with a water table problem. If it's practical to do, that is, if it isn't too expensive to put up 14-foot high fences, I think it would be of substantial benefit because you have these two-story homes.
Okay. And that would reduce, and what page of your study shows that, just so we're all looking at the same things?
Yeah, I think my final plot there shows that for Blair Park. Yeah, the plots start with Artesian and then it goes into Blair. And
It's page 18.
I appreciate controlling the kind of paddles used there is difficult, but my final plot in the whole report, I think, is it's 12-foot barriers at I'm confusing myself here. Yeah, at Blair with quieter equipment. I think the one before that is 14-foot barriers without quieter equipment.
So 18 feet would show the decibel, or I'm sorry, not 18 feet. Page 18 would show the 14-foot with ordinary pickle gear.
Right. I'm gonna make sure I get that right here.
Page 18, page 18 is the 14-foot?
Yes.
Okay. So,
ordinary pickleball gear, yes.
and that shows the decibel levels using your studies at those various points, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it says 4.2 meters there on the diagram.
Right. Okay.
Now, I wrapped that all the way over, across the north side because there are some homes to the north. So it's the north side and the east side.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're all looking at the same thing and that we had that correct. Thank you.
Any other questions for
I
Bob?
have a question for Bob, or several questions for Bob. Okay. Bob, George Russell with the Plan Commission and Zoning Board. Your final recommendation really reads as follows. PSM LLC recommends that pickleball sound at sensitive residential locations not exceed 50 dBA. Now, even with your conclusions above, you don't reach the 50 dBA level. So some of the comments you made orally don't exactly match what's in your report in writing. Why do
Okay.
you want to state
We do
final
recommend-
recommend?
Yeah, we do recommend 50 dBA be your goal. And I appreciate that's hard to achieve. If second-story windows need to be 50 dBA, it would be a genuine challenge here. And in our own experience, complaints stop altogether around 50. Some people will still be bothered in the 54 dBA range, is my experience. It will meet the ANSI requirements, and generally it'll be acceptable in the community, but I will say that it will not be universally acceptable.
Why would we not consider, because I don't see it in any of your alternatives, moving a sound-absorbing fence just to the immediate east side of the pickleball courts? All of your runs that I see have the fence at the east side of the tennis court, and you've made a very big point about sound and line of sight. If you move the fencing immediately adjacent to the pickleball courts, why would that not result in a substantial improvement?
Well, that's a good insight into that. I didn't want to destroy the tennis court. If you could find a way to, you say the fence won't fit there and allow you to still play tennis, it would be more effective. And I would be pleased to put a barrier at that location next to the pickleball courts. It would probably drop the sound level several decibels by moving the barrier there, but you'd have to move the tennis court as well.
Did you make that judgment of the Park District that they couldn't put the fence there?
I made the assumption that I was not changing the position of the courts. If you would like me to review that and move the tennis court over effectively, that would be a reasonable thing to do. It would make things somewhat better.
Yeah, I certainly, since it's going to be postponed a month anyway, would like to see that run to see what it does. I'm also curious, since you do say in 2 locations that it should not exceed 50 dBA, why you're not recommending the use of these sound reduction balls also? Why not, to get to the 50 or better? Because right now, the best we have is 56 and 58 on the second story of these homes.
If you felt you could enforce the use of quieter equipment, it would bring you down into that range.
Okay, well, I'd like to see what those runs are also. I'm assuming you're going to be asked to do additional runs anyway when the village's sound consultant reviews your report.
Yeah, I'll be pleased.
The other thing that would be very helpful to all of us, when you printed out this report, and I'm assuming you printed it and then sent it to the village, the pagination breaks were just horrible. It was very, very difficult to follow what each picture was actually representing. I'm an engineer, I know how to read drawings, and I just want to comment on that, and I hope that can be improved as this report is circulated, because there are times, just as Member Toll asked you earlier about your comment on the bottom of page 16, what that actually, or 18, what that actually applied to. If you look at the report as it's printed out, it's very hard to translate some of your written comments with all your pictures.
Well, I am sorry about that. We don't actually have a secretary. It's my poor typing skills. And when I go from Google Drive, Google Docs to PDF, it changes the pagination. If you like, I will revise this report to move the barrier and try to improve the nomenclature of the identification of the plots.
Yeah, you do understand, I think that's important to the average user of these, to be able to understand what the plot actually represents. And it is very confusing as you go through this. I had to keep writing arrows and moving one comment from one page to the, leading it to the picture on the next page. I think that's all that I have for you. I have a lot of questions for the Park District, but in terms of, well, I won't belabor that right now. Thank you.
And Bob, you understand that we're trying to balance a significant number of rights and responsibilities, correct?
Yes.
No, thank you for the insight, thank you for the report, and please proceed with the requested modifications if it's acceptable to the Park District to do so.
And would you like me to stay and listen to the comments about pickleball sound?
That's up to the Park District.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Our next expert that we'd like to bring forward to the PCZBA is Steve Albert. He's the president of Allstate Appraisals, and Allstate Appraisal is a 65-year-old Chicago metropolitan area-based national appraisal and valuation consulting service firm. Stephen is a member of the Appraisal Institute, through which he earned the MAI and the SRA designations, and he's a recognized expert witness and appraiser. He's testified before a wide variety of circuit and federal courts as well as municipalities. And from here, I will let Steve continue on his own CV.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good evening. Good evening. I first want to mention that as a real estate appraiser, I am basically a researcher and a reporter. I research the market and I report what the market has conveyed to me through sales, through public record information, through statistics, and through empirical market research. So I was retained to prepare an impact study in connection with the existing pickleball courts insofar as how they may be injurious to the property values and marketability of the surrounding 8 residential properties. I didn't limit my market research to the subject's area's 8 residential properties. I extended my search to other areas of Lake in Cook County, and in my expert report, we've addressed examples of sales of homes, both near pickleball facilities as well as away from pickleball facilities, to measure several important items. Number one was what they sold for per square foot, what the homes, which is what my research was limited to, sold for on a per square foot or a unit basis. Number two, we looked into how long it took to sell the homes in the immediate vicinity of pickleball courts. In other words, the marketing time, the days on market. I wanted to ascertain if there was a material difference in the time that it took to market and sell a home in the immediate vicinity of a pickleball court relative to another similar home away from that external influence. I also took into account the sales price to list price ratio of the homes. In other words, did the homes sell at list price, or did they sell substantially lower or higher than list price? And was that disparity, if it existed, could I attribute that to the proximity to the pickleball courts? So a pickleball court or any other external influence in the appraisal world can be referred to as a form of external obsolescence if it has a negative impact on the property's value. External obsolescence is a loss in value attributable to a property's proximity to some external locational factor that impacts negatively on the value or marketability of a home. So is my report going to show up on the screen? I know that I came in late in the game, and I don't know if it was something I can share on the screen. I don't have to. I can go over it, but it could be helpful if it's something that can be shared on the screen. And I have no problem going forward without it being on the screen.
If you want to start, we can get it up on the screen.
I'm not going to give an exhaustive, granular dissertation of what I've done, but from a high level, what we did was we took into account other pickleball courts in Lake and other parts of Cook County, wherever we can find them, and we found 11 examples. Oh, that's going to be helpful. We found 11 examples of sales of homes both near and away from pickleball courts and measured those items I've just described. So yeah, this page is obviously the subject property. In yellow is the subject pickleball and tennis courts, and of course in red are the, if I'm not mistaken, 8 residential properties. The average distance of the edge of the pickleball courts to the property lines of the 8 homes in this exhibit, if I understand correctly, is from 65 feet to 225 feet. And believe me, correct me if I'm wrong, but those are the numbers that I believe to be accurate at this point. So we did look for sales of homes near pickleball courts that ranged from 65 feet, ideally to the 250 feet that you see in this exhibit, in this aerial. But there were instances where some of the sales of homes that I used as my sample homes exceeded 100 feet from the pickleball courts. In fact, the distance of the market data that is the subject of this impact study was from 65 feet to 435 feet. I recognize, as was, I think, highlighted by the sound expert, that the further a property is from the pickleball court, obviously, the lower the potential impact in a property's value and marketability from a common sense perspective. But let me go through the data. So if you turn to page 5, 2 more pages. Here are, and I'm going to go into much greater detail than just this summary chart. Here are the locations that we found. I'm not suggesting these to be so exhaustive as to preclude any possibility that we might have missed some homes or pickleball courts. Given adequate time, maybe we can find additional. But I do find that the amount of sample properties that we've identified in the time frame that we took to prepare our impact study, I personally believe that the results are credible. I think that the sample size is indicative of a pattern, which I'm going to go over now. When you start turning to page, well, let me just stay here for a moment. You can see that we went to Deerfield, Libertyville, Glenview, Vernon Hills, Mundelein, Palatine, and we actually found another example in Lake Bluff. If I had found an adequate number of sales of homes in Lake Bluff, we would have limited our research to Lake Bluff, the location of the properties in question. But there was only one example of a sale of a home near a pickleball court in Lake Bluff that I identified in my market research, and that was item number 10 in this chart. So the items that we looked for, first and foremost, were we wanted to identify what a home sold for in the immediate vicinity of a pickleball court compared to what the home's average sales prices per square foot and the home's average days on market and the home's average list price to sales price ratio were in the subject's defined neighborhood. Either it was a subject subdivision or a subject's, we use subject polygon there. If we didn't have a defined subdivision, we extended our search into a large enough area to account for the subject's immediate neighborhood. Generally speaking, we range from a quarter-mile radius of the pickleball courts to roughly 0.4-mile radius of the pickleball courts. In other words, the greater market area that we compared to the individual home sales ranged from a quarter-mile radius to 0.4 miles, which was, again, either the subject subdivision itself, when that was identifiable, or the subject's immediate neighborhood if it wasn't in a specific subdivision. We limited that distance to preclude overlapping sales into other neighborhoods or communities. So if we turn to page 8, this is the first example. Now I want to stress some of these samples are not like the subject property. Some are much smaller. In this instance, you have 2 pickleball courts. I recognize the subject has 6. I'm cognizant of that. I'm not suggesting any one particular sample or comparable is indicative of the market. But when we look at these collectively, we'll see a trend. And I'm going to convey that to you by the end of this brief testimony. So this property is in Deerfield in the Deer Run subdivision. It's a home, and by the way, the details of the sale will be on the following page, but bear with me for the moment. This single-family residence, and we limited our research only to single-family homes. We didn't include apartment buildings or commercial properties. My research was limited to single-family homes, both in the immediate vicinity of, as well as away from pickleball courts. That's it, a very limited study, which I thought was specific to the property, the subject properties in question, the 8 homes surrounding the Park District's pickleball courts. You can see on this exhibit the distance of the home that sold from the pickleball court. In this particular instance, this was a sale of a home in 2022. It was in the market for 1 day, and it sold at a price 27% higher than its list price. So if you turn to the next page very briefly, and I recognize this print will be small, but if the board chooses, they can share this report with whomever wants a copy of it. This is just a copy of the MLS sheet, just from the multiple listing service. This property was listed for sale for $949,000, and it sold in 1 day for 27% more than that, for $1,200,000. I'm not suggesting that the proximity to the pickleball court resulted in a higher purchase price. I'm suggesting that it doesn't appear as though the proximity to the pickleball court was injurious to the purchase price. That's the only point that we're identifying here. We are not attributing a benefit to the proximity. I'm measuring if there's a detriment to the proximity. So if you turn to the next page, these are all the sales in this specific subdivision, what they sold for, I believe when they sold. Well, I don't know if I have that date. Yes, I do. How long they were on the market. Let me take it from left to right. So you have the MLS number. The status is closed, meaning it's a closed sale. The street address and the street name, it's obvious. The type of home, 2-story, split level, very obvious. What the home was listed for, what the home sold for, the sales price to list price ratio. When you see 1.0, that means the home sold at 100% of its list price. If you see 1.10, the home sold for 10% more than its list price. That's what that means. The sales price or sold per square foot, the very next column, shows what that sales price was broken down on a per square foot basis. In other words, the sales price divided by the size of the home, the gross living area. And then the date that the property sold, the closing date of the sale. The next column says MT. That stands for marketing time, how long that home was on the market before it sold. As you can see, those homes took anywhere from, I believe, 2 days to 452 days to sell. And then the size of the home is on the far right. The ASF means the actual square footage. So if you look under market indicators on this page, and by the way, every example that I have of the 10 examples in our impact study are laid out identically. So I'm not going to go through this every single time. I'll just do it once. But you can see that we include the high sales price, the low sales price, the average, and the median. And in green, you see the property itself, the one that sold. Well, you can see that this property sold for, and let me get my glasses on, $1,205,000. That was actually the highest price sale in this development. Again, I'm stressing, I'm not suggesting that to be indicative of the benefits of proximity to the pickleball court, but it is interesting that it was the highest price sale, and this property is very close to the pickleball court itself. You can also see that this home sold for 27% more than the listing price. If you look right above that, you can see that the average list price to sales price is 1.01 in this neighborhood, or in this subdivision, meaning most of the homes sold for full list. This sold for something even more than that. And then you can also see that the home sold for $288 per square foot, whereas the average price per square foot of all these sales in the same exact neighborhood sold on average $215 per square foot. And then lastly, you can see that this home sold in 1 day. I'm looking at the green letters, whereas right above it, the average time to sell a home in this subdivision was 44 days. So all we're saying here is that in this particular instance, here's a home in the immediate proximity of a pickleball court. I recognize it's 2 courts. So again, I'm not putting much weight on this. It's just one indication. There's some really good ones coming up. This is not one of the best ones, but it was the highest price sale, sold in the shortest amount of time, and had the highest unit price. Let's go to the very next example. If you turn to page 11, we have another example in the same development. I'm not going to go over this because it's another house in the same exact location. Well, I should say near the same exact pickleball court, just south of it in this case. And it's also further away from the pickleball courts, 280 feet. Again, the subject properties range from 65 feet of the 8 homes near the subject pickleball courts to as far away as 250 feet. This is further than that. This is 280 feet. Again, only 2 pickleball courts, but if you turn to the very next page, even this sale, I'm sorry, turn 2 pages to page 13, please. If you can go to page 13 on this report, you'll see that, if you wouldn't mind, yeah, right there is fine. You can see that this particular home, in green, you can see it sold for $479,000, which is full list price. It sold for $209 per square foot, which is a little bit higher than the average of $205 per square foot for this neighborhood, for this subdivision. It sold in 44 days, and the average days on market for homes in this development are 45 days, so that was consistent. And it's just another indication that all indicators in this instance are in line with prevailing market norms. Again, redundantly, I'll admit, not a great comparable. Okay, but now let's get to some of the better comparables. Please turn to page 14. These are not in order of how heavily these were weighted in my analysis. Again, this is the data that existed. I want to stress to you that as an appraiser, I've already conveyed to you, an appraiser is best described as a researcher of the market and a reporter of what we've identified. But much more importantly than that, an appraiser is impartial. By state and federal law, all licensed appraisers are acting impartially. I don't anticipate ever having an opportunity to play pickleball in your community. I don't live near here. I do play pickleball, and interestingly, I will travel up to 30 miles to find a pickleball court availability on a weekend on the one day a week that I play. It's true, and every one of my friends or relatives who play pickleball have no problem traveling just to get a court for 1 hour. That having been said, I'm only mentioning that because I can corroborate the point that was made, I think, by the sound expert, that people will travel if they feel that the existing pickleball courts are a little crowded. They will travel to a nearby facility. Statistically, we're seeing that happening. But that's besides the point. If you turn to page 14, which we're on right now, here's a property in Libertyville. I want to stress, I stayed as close to Lake Bluff as I could in my market research. I didn't exclude anything closer than what I've identified. This is what we identified. We didn't exclude any other pickleball proximity sales. In this instance, there's 2 properties here that are close to the pickleball courts. Here's another example where there's only 2. In this instance, the 2 properties are within 100 feet of the pickleball courts, not that dissimilar to the subject properties, up to 250 feet in this instance. So this is a good example only insofar as these homes' proximities to the pickleball courts. If you turn to page 16, 2 pages after this, you will see that these 2 sales that back up to the same exact pickleball courts, and if you go to the very bottom, we're going to look for the green. These 2 sales, 577 Drake and 563 Drake, both single-family homes, and I won't go into great detail here because I've already gone over this, but they sold within the prevailing market norms. The purchase prices fall within the same range of what's typical in the neighborhood, in this immediate neighborhood. The price per square foot falls right in line. Actually, it's higher than the average in this neighborhood. If you note that the average price per square foot of a home in this neighborhood is $254 a square foot, these 2 homes sold between $344 a square foot to $354 a square foot. Again, I'm not citing that there's a correlation between these higher unit prices and the proximity to the pickleball courts, because I don't believe that to be the case. I'm only pointing out that there didn't appear to be a reduction in the unit price or a reduction in the days on market. I'm sorry, an increase in the days on market that would be attributable to the proximity to the pickleball courts. In fact, 577 Drake sold in 6 days, whereas the average days on market in this neighborhood is 36 days. And then 563 Drake did take a little longer to sell. It took 52 days to sell. That might be attributable to a number of factors. Maybe it was overlisted, maybe it wasn't in great condition, but it isn't a dramatic increase. It's an extra 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks. Let's turn to some of the better examples now, starting on page 4. On page 4, this is a property at 1327 Pam Ann Drive in Glenview. This is Flick Park. This to me is a, oh, I'm sorry, did I? Page 18, this is comparison number 4. Yeah, sorry, did I? I've been up since 5 this morning, guys, and I just got back in town from Florida late last night, so bear with me. This is an apples-to-apples comparison from my perspective. Maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't. Flick Park has 6 courts, like the subject property. Those 2 homes just to the, I'm sorry, that home where you see the linear indicator of the distance to the west of the courts is located 65 feet to the west. That's as close as the closest home in the subject's immediate vicinity. This is the most like the subject development, in my opinion. Flick Park is not dramatically different than the subject's park. So let's turn to page 20, which is 2 pages later, and let's look at the statistics for this sale. So again, in green, this home sold for $420,000, which is essentially, it sold for full list. Didn't sell less than list. It sold at list price. It sold at $343 a square foot, which is considerably higher than the average price in this neighborhood, which is $251 per square foot. It sold in 14 days, which is about half, less than half, of the average time it took to sell all the other homes that are not near the pickleball courts in this neighborhood. And that's basically indicating that this particular home, which is in the immediate vicinity of those pickleball courts, sold within prevailing market norms. There's no indication that this home was impacted negatively by the proximity to the pickleball courts. And it's a really strong example. Now, is it a perfect example? There is no such thing as perfection in an appraisal situation. There is always an element of subjectivity. I didn't get inside this home to see its condition, but the condition is described on the MLS sheet in great detail, and there are interior photographs of this home in the MLS sheet, and there didn't appear to be any red flags suggesting that this home was superior to other homes in the neighborhood. It seems like a typical home for its neighborhood, which makes these numbers compelling from an appraiser's perspective. So let's go to the next example, which is on page 22. And this is a property in Vernon Hills. Again, I didn't limit my research only to examples where there was no negative impact. This is everything I found in the time frame that we were allotted to get this impact study done. 344 Tally Ho Drive in Vernon Hills is on page 22. This is a home that's roughly 230 feet from the court. So that's within the distance of some of the homes in the subject's immediate development. It's not as close as the closest, which is 65 feet. And there is some screening between the back of this home and the boundary of the pickleball courts. There's some trees and vegetation. What I don't know is if this court includes any kind of sound barriers. But if you turn to page 24, again, this particular property reflects, on page 24, I'll have the statistic, there you go. In green, this property sold for $543,000, which is 0.97% of what it was listed for. You know, it doesn't indicate that there was a problem insofar as the list price is concerned. The average list price to sales price ratio, sales price to list price ratio is 0.98, so it falls in line. This home sold for $183 per square foot, which is right in line with the average of $188 per square foot, and it sold in 13 days, which is actually faster than the average marketing time of 63 days. Again, these are not randomly selected. These are the sales that we identified in our market research, and these are the indicators that are showing up in public record. This is not a reflection of my opinion. This is a reflection of me reporting what the market has already shown us factually to have occurred. There's no opinion reflected in this report. I'm just reporting these statistics right from the market. They're irrefutable. If you turn to page 25, this is a property in Mundelein. On page 25, this is the furthest home, the distance reflected between this home and the pickleball courts is the furthest in my study. It's almost too far to even be meaningful, but there is no barrier between the back of this home and the pickleball court in terms of sound barriers. There's just distance. And I know distance plays a significant part, based on the sound experts' testimony, in reducing the decibel levels. I'm not suggesting this to be an extraordinary indicator of the market, but it is another indicator. And if you look at this, even though it's the furthest from the courts, if you turn to page 27, again, this is the statistic page, all these items are in line again. Granted, it's pretty far away, right? 435 feet, I'm not even sure how loud that would be, but it is the closest home in proximity to the pickleball court that sold recently, and it sold within all the prevailing market norm indicators. If you turn to page 29, we have a really good comparison. Page 29 is also in Vernon Hills. It's a property at 204 on Wensia Road. It sold in 2021. It is further from the pickleball courts. Granted, it's 325 feet. I recognize that's substantially farther than 65 feet, but there's a lot of courts here. I think there's 8 or more. I think even the tennis courts can be used as pickleball courts in this location. Don't quote me on that because I wasn't able to confirm that, but from a visual perspective, it appears to be a pretty similar comparison in terms of the number of courts. There is something else that buffers the sound between this home and the pickleball courts. I recognize that. There's another home, and that could really dampen the sound substantially. But even though it's buffered by another home and 325 feet, it doesn't preclude consideration completely. It just doesn't merit major consideration. But looking at the statistics on page 32 in this instance, page 32, all the statistics are within the range of prevailing market norms at the very bottom of page 32. The home sold for full list price. It sold for the average price per square foot. It sold for essentially the average days on market. again, there was no correlation between this proximity of these homes to the pickleball courts and what would appear to be a negative impact on what they're selling for per square foot or how long it's taking for them to sell. If you turn to page 33, and we're getting close to the end of my report, but there's some good information towards the end that might be compelling for you. Maybe it won't. This is in Palatine. This one only has 2 courts, but my understanding was the tennis court can be utilized in this capacity, but it's within 100 feet. This home backs directly to those paddle sports, and on page 35 at the bottom, again, the statistics are the same as the prevailing market norms. Again, this is not me conveying an opinion. I'm just reporting factual information. This home sold for full list price. It sold for pretty much the average price per square foot of other homes in its immediate neighborhood. It sold in 16 days. That's the average for the neighborhood. There's no red flag or obvious indication of a diminution in value resulting from the pickleball court proximity. But let's take a look at the next one, which might be more compelling. This is on page 37. This is our second to last comparison. 176 West Cunningham Drive in Palatine. There's 6 pickleball courts here. This property is about 235 feet from the back of the pickleball courts. That's a pretty good distance, but again, the 8 homes that surround the subject pickleball courts range from 65 feet to 250 feet. So this 235 feet doesn't preclude consideration. It's within the subject's range, the subject property's range itself. But there's no screening between the back of these pickleball courts that I was able to see and the back of the subject residence at 176 West Cunningham. And if you turn to page 39, again, the statistics on page 39, it shows that the sales price per square foot is directly within range of the neighborhood comparables. The sales price to list price ratio is also fully within the norm, and the marketing time is actually lower than average. And there's 6 courts there. So here's the last example on page 40. And this is in Lake Bluff. This is a comparable in Lake Bluff. And you're probably all familiar with this location, 116 Ravine Avenue in Lake Bluff. Now, the pickleball courts are pretty far away, 370 feet, right? I get it. That's far away. There might not be a lot of noise there. I'm not a sound expert. I would defer to the sound expert's testimony, or if he were to study this, to ascertain if there's even a decibel level perceptible. But it certainly is in close enough proximity to merit some consideration. But what's compelling about this property, here's an instance where it didn't sell within the neighborhood norms. It sold for a lower price per square foot, and it took longer to sell. But I don't believe that's due to the proximity of the pickleball courts. This is a home that was available for sale, vacant for 5 years. It was vacant for 5 years. It was ultimately, well, that's probably why it sold for a lower price per square foot. It was in poor condition. The MLS sheet's in the following page. It goes into the condition of the property. But what's interesting is the buyer of this property didn't occupy the residence. They tore it down. And just so you know, this home sold for $330-something thousand. It's basically a vacant land sale because they tore the house down. So the motivation behind the purchase was not to occupy the home. They tore down the property, and now there's a home for sale there for $1.9 million. $1.9 million. So the developer of this property didn't appear to be deterred by the proximity of the pickleball courts. So an impact study attempts to measure a relationship between proximity of a proposed use or of an existing use that could be perceived as having a negative impact on the value or marketability of a property. I am not suggesting there aren't buyers who would never in a million years buy a home near a pickleball court. In fact, me personally, given the opportunity to buy a home near a pickleball court and an identical home away from a pickleball court for the same price, I'm going to choose the home that's away from the pickleball court. That's just my personal preference. But I'm not suggesting that that's because it's worth less or it's worth more. It's just my personal preference. Some people like to buy homes with a pool amenity, and they just can't wait to get it. They want their kids to enjoy it. They want to enjoy it themselves. Then there's plenty of buyers who wouldn't pay any price for a home with a pool. So a proximity to a pickleball court may be a consideration for a buyer who doesn't want to buy that home at any price or would pay less for that property because of that proximity, but that does not show in terms of market research to be a correlated event to lower prices or longer days on market. So that's the nature of this impact study. I want to stress, again, redundantly, I don't have a dog in this fight. If the market showed that values were dropping, I would be conveying to you, or maybe I wouldn't have been retained. But I was surprised by the results, to be honest with you. I was surprised by the results, that every one of these sales that we identified did not show a correlation between proximity, price paid per square foot, and days on market. Are there possibly other examples that would show something different than mine? Yes, that is a possibility. But I didn't intentionally overlook anything. That having been said, I mean, if there's any questions on our methodology, it's been contained in the report. It's a pretty straightforward study. It's not an appraisal. We didn't tell anybody what their home was worth. There was no appraisal that took place here. It was an impact study. That having been said, are there any questions by the board? Of course, I'm going to stay if there's questions from the audience, but that concludes my testimony.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the commissioners? I guess I've got just a couple questions for you. Any knowledge with respect to what mitigation or remediation was in place at any of the courts in question?
No, I don't have any knowledge. I didn't have the opportunity to speak to the park districts or the operators of the pickleball courts to ask that question, and there were certain time constraints in this engagement that precluded me from driving to each location to physically look at the courts. So I don't have that information. Because the continuance is 30 days from now, that's information that will be readily available to me, and which I can convey to my client, who can then convey to the board, if that's something you'd like me to follow up with.
And then just for my cursory review, we just got the report obviously this evening. Many of the sales seem to occur during the middle of COVID. Does that have any impact?
Yeah, so I would guess that there would be some impact because the intensity of use during the earlier sales was probably less pronounced than the intensity of use today. But to the point of the sound expert, what you're seeing today is an expansion of courts in municipalities. There's more courts being built, and there's also a traceable trend of players of pickleball to extend their willingness to travel to play games so as to preclude congestion at one location. So while it's obvious pickleball continues to grow in popularity, that having been said, there's also a correlated event where people are now traveling to other locations to play the game. So it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be greater traffic in one location.
And I guess no information or no indication as to the usage of the courts in question.
The intensity of use?
Yes.
It was not information that I can convey within the time frame that I had to complete my assignment. Okay.
And
I would imagine there's different levels of usage at each court's location, and if for no other reason, more courts will bring more players. And so far as the amount of time that is allotted to one particular court, that's a question for the municipality. There might be limitations in the hours of operation that I wasn't able to secure during this engagement.
Okay. And I think you would agree that reasonable experts or reasonable consultants could differ regarding their opinions looking at the same set of data.
Well, I agree that different experts can certainly develop and convey different opinions, without question. That's the nature of our industry. It happens. But those opinions need to be credible. So two appraisers can have different opinions, but they have to be credible opinions. Just because an appraiser says it's my opinion and he or she conveys a number or a conclusion that isn't supported by market evidence doesn't mean it's a credible opinion. So we're not entitled to develop opinions of value just because it's our own independent opinion that aren't credible, because that could become misleading, which is not allowed in our industry. But yes, I do acknowledge that if there's another set of data that another expert identified and studied, it is possible that their conclusions could differ from mine. But this data clearly shows no discernible trend or negative impact from this external influence, the pickleball courts.
I don't have any other questions at this time, but again, we really haven't had a chance to critically review the report.
I just have one comment. It appears to me that there's a significant amount of correlation, but not necessarily causation. We don't know why people purchased the homes that they purchased, and the fact that they are near pickleball courts may or may not be relevant to the purchasers.
Without question. Absolutely.
And I'll continue with that, particularly during that period of 20 to 21, it seemed like no matter what the exterior influence was, all of these houses were going to sell in a day, right? I mean, everybody was scrambling to get out. So, it would be certainly, I think, more valuable information if we could, maybe 23 and 24 sales, I think would be more appropriate than going all the way back to 20 and 21.
Agreed. We did search specifically for the most current sales available, and that's what we come up with. I will state that while certainly demand was unbelievably heightened with 2.5% 30-year fixed mortgage rates, it's never happened in my lifetime. I suspect it will never happen again, ever. That having been said, there is still such reduced inventory of residential properties throughout the country that we have not seen any softening of any significance of prices being paid for homes. And I have not seen any measurable softening. I shouldn't generalize because there's always examples of markets that were a little bit frothy, that have settled a little bit, but generally speaking, we have not seen any reduction in prices since the pandemic, due primarily to limited inventory, despite the unbelievably fast increase in the cost of borrowing money, from 2.5% to 7.25% today. So surprisingly, even for an appraiser, we had expected some softening in prices. We haven't seen it yet, and we're still seeing properties selling very quickly. What we're not seeing is the preponderance of prices over list price right now. We're seeing some normalcy. So, thank you. Yeah. Any other questions of the board? Okay.
Nope,
thank you.
no, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Just one last thing to conclude. Ms. Kivel, I don't know if Mr. Irvin is going to speak regarding anything, or?
He is in attendance, but I'm not sure if he is planning on saying anything at this point.
Okay. Just to inform the PCZBA, there has been communication from the village to the Park District regarding support of pickleball and the possibility of a grant. I will just simply conclude with the letter that was sent by President Charlot on February 22nd, 2024 did not specify a dollar value for a grant, nor any parameters of a grant to the Park District regarding pickleball. So I'll just simply leave it at that, because I would prefer that someone from the village be able to articulate anything further. But again, there was the offer of a grant. There's nothing specific regarding a dollar value or the parameters of what this grant would be for. Okay? So we can either have options. We can either go into testimony. They're talking. I mean, technically, the individual questions of the public to the applicant would fall after, but I mean, it's at your discretion if you'd like to allow members of the public, like, ask questions of the
We're just waiting until they stop talking. I think that would be best if Drew wanted to come up at this time, but.
Just general questions. Sure, we talked.
General questions from the board. I mean, the board questions the applicant during this time. Public comment, you're still deliberating. But you can continue to ask questions. This would be a good time to ask questions from the board. Should I grab the sign sheet? The sign up sheet? Are there any more questions from the board?
Yeah.
For the applicant right now?
Oh, I see.
Clarify.
Yeah. Any questions from the commissioners for the petitioner at this time? I'm sure there are going to be more questions going forward, but.
Yeah, I have several for the Park District.
Yeah.
We-
Yeah,
one-
please proceed.
Could I clarify one thing? We didn't address all of the standards that are included for the RIO district. We submitted those in writing. Do you want us to provide testimony on those? Or is a preference to, we would stand on our responses that were there?
It's up to you if you want to either adopt the standards in, or that he's talking about his petition.
Yeah, well, we're just trying to work out the timing.
And I appreciate everyone's been sitting here for a long time, and there's people that want
Right.
to speak. So I don't want to belabor the point.
I mean, I think it's crystal clear to the petitioner that the public hearing is going to be continued until next month. The question really is for us whether or not we want to proceed with questioning of the petitioner or go through the standards, or whether or not we want the public to create the record that they want to create. And that's what I'm trying to work my way through right now.
You can ask the board if they want to do.
Yeah, what's the board's preference? Would you like to allow the public to comment Obviously, we're going to have timing restraints per individual comment, or whether you'd like to proceed with questioning the petitioner accordingly. But I hate to impose upon the public to,
We know that the petitioner will be back next month. The people in the audience have taken the night out. I think I'd like to hear from them.
I concur.
I agree.
I think that's our consensus, and we'll proceed accordingly.
Should we grab that list? It's the final list just up here.
Yeah, the approach we'll use as far as public comment is, we'll just go down the list consecutively with respect to who signed in first. We're gonna go with the limit of 3 minutes per comment. I trust that you've all been sworn in, and we'll try to work our way through the list. And at least you'll have an opportunity to present your comments, make a record.
And we know we have at least one person looking to speak online as well, so if there's anyone else looking to speak online, if you wanna put the hand up, we'll get to those as well.
Okay.
Okay, so first on the list is Gail Gamreth.
Oh,
Thank you all, and thank you all. This is Lake Bluff, where I was born and raised.
and if you
I'm
could
Gail
state your name for the
Gamrat.
record, please.
I'm sorry?
State your name and address
Okay,
for
I'm
the record,
sorry.
please.
Gail Gamrat, 660 Green Bay Road. My property is 25 feet from the pickleball courts. I'm taking away my 3-minute speech because of what has already been said here tonight. Mr. Unitek is kind of a famed hero on actually the Pickleball Mitigation Noise Facebook page as a hero because he puts forward, and I think you would say this, he's quoted many times on the internet of saying that he does not recommend pickleball courts within 500 feet of residents. It's on the Pickler. I think he would stand behind that. And so my question for him was, would he have recommended the courts be built where they were? And I have to also say that I know there were lines because I had a FOIA to find out that there were lines there in 2015. We have lived there since 2010. We didn't know. It was barely used, and it was such a different thing once the pickleball courts were made. So I will start from there, and then also I was worried about some of your examples, sir, were at the same time that pickleball courts were being built, like your example in Vernon Hills, and I'm wondering if that's why those people moved, because that's what we're considering right now. So thank you for everyone's time this evening. I will have to cut my pieces short here. I want to thank the Lake Bluff Village trustees and Drew Irvin for listening and paying attention, as this is an issue that is actually harming people. I really want to thank all of you for your time and your service. It appears that many are confounded, and I think you'll hear from them tonight, that in this community, our Lake Bluff, the Park District would continue to promote play on courts that are only 25 feet from properties. You've seen they're one-sided and demonstrated over and over again that they're only interested in increasing pickleball time and play at the Blair Park courts, despite the harm that it causes to the residents. There have been enough lawsuits and noise studies conducted around the U.S. to know that there's no way to mitigate sound when pickleball courts are this close to homes. I have a lot of information for you here. This may not be complicated, but it has a lot of passion on both sides. We believe this zoning process is what prevented pickleball play on the new middle school sports courts, and although not a zoning process, in your very own Tangley Oaks, residents spoke up against pickleball play on their tennis courts, and they stopped it. We want to reiterate that we knew there would be noise buying a home next to the Park District. For 14 years, we have lived there appreciating the sounds from the camps, the horns, the swim meets, the bell from the playground, the swear words coming off the men's paddle leagues at night. One of them sitting right over there. None of those combined compare to how loud and impactful pickleball noise feels as it comes into every corner of our house. We have nothing against pickleball or pickleball players. We want to play more ourselves in our approaching retirement. We can also say without hesitation that no one No one in this room would want pickleball courts 25 feet from their homes. No one would want overnight to lose 20 to 30% of your property value. I have very different information than you, sir. And 50% of potential home buyers out of the gate. It's a deal breaker. We cannot rest, sleep, concentrate, or enjoy watching a movie in our home when the courts are in use. Some people ask, well, if there are just 1 or 2 courts, does it matter? As they say, 1 shot to the heart or 4, it'll still kill you. The sound jolts through you with just a few hits to every core in your soul. The Blair Park courts were a mistake. We just need to fix the mistake. There are other options that won't harm our residents. The pickleball players deserve courts. We deserve some peace in our own home. And those courts, the money's not wasted. They can be used for tennis. We used to have a robust tennis program. So please, help us fix this so we do not have to sell our home, a sale that will probably net us about a $100,000 loss than just 3 years ago before the Park District illegally built these courts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Gammer.
Oh, and here's my information.
Hello, I'm Leif Gamerath, 660 Green Bay Road. Good evening. Thank you to the Village Board, Drew Irving, Regis Charlot, and the Zoning Board for pressing to hear from the residents of Lake Bluff most affected by the unvetted installation of pickleball courts at Blair Park. The neighbors of Lake Bluff Park District are asking the Zoning Board and the Village of Lake Bluff to not approve Blair Park for pickleball. Everyone loves pickleball, but nobody wants pickleball courts in their backyard. The Blair Park courts are as close to our property as I am to you right now. Even our most fervent players represented here tonight are not willing to have the incessant noise, the startling pitch, described by the sound expert as a fire alarm, or the high decibel pollution near their houses. The plastic-on-plastic hit of a pickleball regularly spiking over 60 decibels exceeds Lake Bluff's noise ordinance. The pitch and erratic tempo are proven to induce anxiety and psychological distress, and the fact that we can have 25 pickleball players out there at once borders on 10 hours a day torture. The diplomatic offer of cutting hours in half is like cutting torture in half. It's still torture, and it's still unacceptable. Studies show that sound mitigation, as close as our house is to these courts, is ineffective and a waste of taxpayers' money. Imagine the suggested 14-high-foot fences that is suggested by our sound expert tonight. I pray that the Zoning Board's sensitivity to fencing is observed with this absurd suggestion. I had plenty of time to Google how high maximum security prison fences are, and that's 12 feet. To Google pickleball noises is to find dozens of studies condemning courts as close as Blair Parks are to our house. Article after article chronicles cities suing country clubs, landowners seeking damages, and economic evidence of dramatic reductions in property values. The revenue that the Park District predicts to gain from pickleball directly comes out of our property values. We have gone from a neighborhood of families who love living at the Park District, who bought our houses specifically because we were back up to the Park District, whose kids have grown up here with a joy that radiates from the pool, playground, and paddle courts. And we've changed to a neighborhood that feels manipulated and swindled by the leadership of this Park District. While the Village of Lake Bluff and the Zoning Boards deliberate the testimonies of our town, I invite you to look up the YouTube video ironically titled, "The Soothing Sounds of Pickleball." Loop it in the background at full volume to experience what it's like to live near Blair Park Pickleball mere feet from your property. Then imagine with that 10 hours a day. This is what it sounds like with a 14-high-foot fence. Thank you for your time and service.
Thank you, Mr. Gamerath.
Okay, Carrie Biankowski.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Biankowski. I live at 331 East Witchwood Lane in Lake Bluff. Just earlier this week, I found myself writing a thank you note for a thank you gift that was dropped off at my house, and I thought to myself, that is the most Lake Bluff thing ever, right? A thank you note for a thank you gift. When I describe Lake Bluff to people, I say it's a place where the kids are safe, the dogs are happy, the beer is cold, and the people are kind. In addition to kindness, I'd also use the words pragmatism, balance, fairness, and civility to describe my neighbors and my neighborhood. Which is why I'm here tonight, because what I have observed in terms of behavior and actions relating to the pickleball courts has been anything but fair, balanced, and civil. There has been endless documentation of the noise disturbance pickleball courts cause, so much so that dozens of municipalities across Illinois alone have implemented clear regulations that ban pickleball courts within 300 feet of houses. Yet here we are talking about courts that are less than 50 feet from the homes of Lake Bluff residents. As a homeowner and resident, I see inconsistencies between what I have to do as an individual to secure a permit and what was done with the courts. The Lake Bluff Village website is clear that building permits for all projects resulting in an alteration or improvement of a property are required. Several reasonable steps are outlined, but y'all know that better than I do. And for the record, when we redid our bathroom, you guys were amazing, so thank you for that. Minimum expectation is that all entities are held to a consistent standard. I am no lawyer, but I am not aware of any law or legal consideration that exempts any entity, private or otherwise, from going through the formal permitting process. Yet this is exactly what happened. As a taxpayer and a business person who has fiscal responsibility for significantly large budgets, I would also expect some basic certain things. Specifically, a robust and transparent process that included stakeholder engagement and objective impact studies, as well as robust cost-benefit analysis. None of these were done originally, and subsequent efforts were neither objective or complete. Sound mitigation efforts and set hours for play sound good in theory, and we all want compromise these days. But it's not a compromise, it's a signal that we're okay with fudging on due process and cutting corners. It's also a signal that we're going to have different standards for different entities in our community. Individual citizens have to follow the rules, but wink, wink, other folks don't. I trust that you will do the right thing and recommend the discontinuation of pickleball at Blair Park courts. Thank you for your time. Thank you for serving this community that we all love. Thank you for making space for this conversation tonight. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Jan?
My name is Jan Snowbrick, and I've lived in Lake Bluff for 63 years in the same house. I was here before Blair Park was here. I saw the golf course built. I happen to know the builder. I have seen much, and I sat in park board meetings because of the funny money stuff since 1996 until got a good hold of Ron Selsey, the new director before this other this handsome director who came aboard, and Ron actually saved that park district because of the funny money that was going around. But anyhow, I was appalled to see this news, I think it's this email thing that's been going around, stating, giving facts that are really false facts. And you heard the factual information today. I mean, these are hard facts. I deal in hard facts. And I find it rather, we saw here, you gave this research that was done. Those are hard facts. Yet we hear in this newsletter, or we see in this newsletter, statements like depreciation of my home, lost value and everything like that, and of all the homes around, that are around paddle tennis courts, 50% of the viewers go in and out. So I got a hold of some research from the county, county assessor, and it said that the evaluation of the home had not gone down at all, the home that they mentioned on here. And in several years, it was the same value. And I find that interesting. And so I'm just wondering what's going on here. I understand that the village has committed supposedly $100,000 if the park district moves the paddle tennis court somewhere. But it's not in writing yet. But this was a commitment made, supposedly. But what I really resent most is that I don't mind paying taxes, but I hate paying taxes for lawyers, going after one another, and my tax money going for paying all for these lawyers for things that have no purpose at all. It's just battlement of people not coming together in our community and feeling that they have certain rights and certain things. I agree that there's noise with the paddle courts. But there was also a big battle when they put up the pickleball, of course, sorry about that. But there was also a big battle when they put in the paddleball courts there and brought the building over, which was supposed to be free, but it cost the taxpayers $400,000 to put it up. So anyhow, I am very disappointed in this, and I'm going to be calling, I'm going to be FOIAing the park district probably within a few days, and I'm going to be FOIAing the village to see just how much it costs in lawyer fees for this nonsense. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Nathan Pavlik.
Hi there, for the record, Nathan Pavlik, 670 Green Bay Road, adjacent to the courts. And typically when you get together, I imagine you need to speculate, imagine what the impact is going to be if you approve a change. You don't have to do that here because the courts are there, nets have been installed, and extensive use has taken place. So we're living that outcome, and as neighbors, we're suffering the consequences. I've shared a number of consequences and learnings in various forums over the past year as we've had an opportunity to share our views. I'll cover some of them very briefly. Noise, the sound expert said it better than I could have. It's loud, the pitch is annoying, it gets everywhere, can't avoid it. Mitigation, even the park district noted that pickleballers don't want the mitigation because it ironically makes it louder for them on the court. The sound is annoying. Reduced hours are hard to enforce. In a moment, I'm going to share my experience from this past week. The hours cause confusion, breed animosity, and restrict use of the courts for things like tennis that we used to enjoy. Impact on property value, I don't want to dwell on it, but it is real. I ask you to consider the damaging effects. And really, there are other options. We've heard about the willingness of pickleball players to travel. There are other locations, some in existence already, and perhaps others that could be built further from homes. I thought it might be helpful just to share my experience over the past week as weather has gotten warmer.
Yeah, we've got about 30 seconds, Nathan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wednesday at 7:15, I had to go and ask people to stop playing after hours while I'm trying to put my 6-year-old to sleep. That happened again on Thursday. Both Friday afternoon and Saturday, when they're supposed to be closed, there was play. That was programming. If it's considered programming, the park district can do what they want. All of this was just a single game taking place, and that noise comes in regardless. So to close, I'd simply say that at Blair Park, the courts are too close to homes, and I'd ask you not to approve the change in use.
Thank you, Nathan.
Katie.
Okay, my name is Katie Pavlik, and I'm at 670 Green Bay Road. The pickleball courts at Blair Park are in violation of the Lake Bluff Municipal Code, specifically the public nuisances declared and various nuisances enumerated. They substantially annoy, injure, and endanger our comfort and our health in our home, and they are an offensive noise that disturbs the peace and quiet of the neighborhood and the people residing in the vicinity. And I want you to know, this is all noise that we hear with our windows closed and with our 3 kids in the house and our dog, and ambient noise from Green Bay Road and ambient noise from Blair Park itself. Our house is not quiet, but pickleball, that noise still comes in to offend us. So why do I label them offensive? The noises, I think the sound expert really explained it well. It's that noise that our brains are trained to pay attention to. So even if you're trying to tune it out, your brain is like, nope, I gotta pay attention. It's like constant false alarms for our attention, making it really difficult to relax and concentrate, sleep soundly. I get woken up by pickleball in my bedroom. So the World Health Organization has now recognizes this type of noise exposure as a psychological stressor that over time can produce a range of diagnosable illnesses. And I don't want that for our kids or our neighbors or ourselves. And I know the Park District brought up noise abatement. Looking online, a lot of companies that specialize in abatement won't even recommend trying for courts that are this close. And I read an article by Mr. Unitech that said, you know, if their courts are within 500 feet, you're gonna have problems. No matter what, you're gonna have problems. And the fence that they're talking about is like kind of ridiculous. And also there's 3 small arborvitae that are my height. So that's a little frustrating to hear. And also, as my husband pointed out, like, it's really hard. The Park District does not have the resources to monitor those courts, to close them when they need to be closed, to monitor the paddles. So that doesn't seem to me to be a tenable thing to move forward with. I love our Lake Bluff Park District. I'm on the board of the Friends, and I fundraise for them, and I love the park. But they have not listened to us. Our emails go unanswered. Our comments and meetings go unacknowledged. They are not working with us. I know they say that they are, but I have email history to show you that they are not. We need your help. We need you to hear us. Please, please do not zone Blair Park for pickleball. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Aaron Jocelyn.
Hi, Erin Joslin, 217 Ascot. I'll try to be quick. I love pickleball. I love tennis. It's all great. And I don't think anybody can deny the merits and the growth of pickleball. So that was great to hear. I think we all know about it. But pickleball players and neighbors across the United States have told media that they consider the constant pock, pock, pock a torture they cannot escape, which Leif pointed out, even with windows closed and with the TV set high and noise barriers. These pickleball neighbors who feel they are having to make lifestyle changes due to the sound emanating from the courts may experience anxiety and psychological distress. Pulled that from the news. I said to myself, well, I did a lot of research. I sent you a letter as well, identifying some of the other reasons around the permit. But I thought, what about the human element of this? I have a daughter. She plays travel volleyball. I walk into these games. I know what I should expect for 8 hours, 2 days, a weekend, every other weekend. Whistles, balls, etc. I leave exhausted, at wit's end, etc. But I walk into that arena and I know what to expect. So I did this research, and there's 3 things about pickleball: the volume of the game, the erratic nature of the noise, all of which you've heard already. The third was most interesting to me. It's the unexpected nature of the noise within the homes. It's an unexpected nature, and I don't think any of us would want that ping, ping, pock, pock, pock in our homes. I leave volleyball tournaments, and I get to go to the quiet of my home. That is not true for the neighbors who live near the tennis courts, the paddle courts. So I think the key reason these people chose the homes, they knew what they were in for. Gail talked about the benefits, the noise, the whistles, the et cetera. That was all there when they got there. I think that the Park District went ahead without a permit and put in courts that created unexpected noise that is intolerable for those who live nearby. And as was witnessed, the experts have said the courts are too close to homes. So my ask for you, and I have nothing in this other than I care about the the community, and I care about the people who are potentially going to be distraught over this decision. So I ask that you deny the Park District their request.
Thank you, ma'am.
Tom Hart.
Hi, my name's Tom Hart. I live at 455 Pine Court. First, I'd like to start out by just thanking the zoning board for all that you do to maintain Lake Bluff as a great place to live. The regulations that are in place, the oversight and appeals process is really invaluable to the community. In preparation for tonight, I read a number of articles. One was an article I recently read in the New York Times that talked about how harmful pickleball can be to anyone within earshot of the game. There was really three key takeaways to me. The first one, and there's quotes in here, it refers to pickleball as the most grating and disruptive sound in the entire athletic ecosystem right now, testing the sanity of anyone within earshot of the game due to the high pitch and the erratic and often frantic rhythms of the smacks. One person in the article was quoted as saying, "Pickleball has replaced leaf blowers as a #1 noise nuisance." And lastly, something that we've heard or stated earlier, and that is that pickleball wax from 100 feet away can reach 70 decibels, the sound of a vacuum cleaner. What we have here is that the Blair Park pickleball courts are 25 feet away from the neighbor's property lines. It's just simply too close. It's too close and has too much impact on the neighbor's well-being. In summary, I'd like to ask the zoning board to do what you do well and protect the neighbors of the Blair Park District and not approve pickleball courts at Blair Park.
Thank you, Mr. Hart.
Randy Pavlik.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Nathan and Katie are my family. I'm a former educator, and the United States Constitution, I have a little different approach to this. In Section 1 of the 14th Amendment reads, quote, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." The concept of equal protection under law ensures that no person or group is denied equal protection based on arbitrary factors. I think in this case, an example of living next to a park district is an arbitrary factor. What due process or equal protection did people have when the park district installed multiple pickleball courts in place of one tennis court without village permits or approval? The park district has violated both the due process and the equal protection sections of the 14th Amendment. Subsequently, the nearby residents have suffered in numerous ways, and you've heard about those, and they have not been able to receive equal justice under the law. I ask that this body comply with the United States Constitution, deny the unjust motion of the Park District, please treat the adjacent residents fairly, and enforce village ordinances from this day forward. I really appreciate the good faith effort made by the village to make a substantial financial offer to the Park District that intends to resolve this issue by relocating pickleball courts away from the residences. I don't think the Park District has not been operating in good faith, and they should not be allowed to have this request granted. They should not be rewarded for being abusive and uncooperative. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Lynn Jessen.
Thank you, everybody, for all that you do for our wonderful town. I am more concerned, having come here and heard all of this tonight, than I was before I arrived here this evening. I am so surprised that residents in our town would be treated with so little respect for what they are going through living next to these courts. when I hear the talk about the sound is even worse than I had realized, in hearing even from the sound expert, articles that have been written, research people have done. But more than anything, what's compelling to me is listening to people who are having to live next to these courts and listen to this sound. And the fact that this is a growing sport, growing in popularity, concerns me even more, because I don't live where a pickleball court is likely to go in next to me, but all over this town, other towns, for people to be affected by a sport with a sound level like this, I think is really, really awful. And this is such a lovely town where people have respect for each other. And I just hope that we can keep it that way. And anyway, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Rich Martin.
Hi, thank you for your time tonight. I'm at 126 East Sheridan Place, not too far from here. My wife and I and our kids all play pickleball. It's a great sport, and we actually played on these courts until we knew this became an issue for the neighbors. We mistakenly made the assumption that the park district had gone through the appropriate process to make sure that the courts were okay with the neighbors. So since then, we have decided we will never play on those courts again. We play inside at the gym or over at the Artesian Park. That being said, I think it's important to understand that we've been in front of this board 25 years ago and 20 years ago when we took the step of putting a porch on the front of our house, as well as putting an addition on. And through that process, we got the approvals because we had to get variances. And then the school board and the PTO also got the approvals for the sport court across from us. And when people found out that they were thinking about pickleball over there, they actually talked to all the neighbors, and we said, hey, no, that's not cool. You can have basketball or badminton or volleyball, whatever, but not pickleball. So I think it's important for you to understand that everyone in this town has to go through this process, and I don't think it's lost on any of you here that we're here because those courts were built without any kind of permit or special use approval, and here we are, 2 years after they're built, and now they're asking for approval for those said courts. So I think it's important to understand the process, and we are under the impression that these courts have to be moved to a different place. I know there's some other opportunities to, maybe behind the gym. There's a cement pad back there that might be a logical place for them. Or, anyways, that's just what I'm thinking. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Steph Martin.
Stephanie Martin, 126 East Sheridan Place. I have a question for you. What was your name?
Steve.
Steve. I understand that you did an assessment on the houses that sold, and you found no correlation. No, there was a correlation, but there was no causation, right? That's what you claimed?
Yes.
Okay, what about the houses, and I would imagine that you did a search for houses that sold, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, what about the houses that never sold, that were located by those? by the pickleball courts?
It's a great question. That was
Yeah.
not within the scope of our research, but your question is, did we give consideration to homes that were listed for sale that may have been near pickleball courts but didn't sell?
Yeah.
To ascertain if they didn't sell because of their proximity? We did not study that at all.
Why not?
Because we're looking to see if there was an impact on sales prices and value.
Okay. But so you admit that there could have been houses on the market that didn't sell that were near pickleball courts?
Sure, of course, it's a possibility.
Okay. So Gail and Leif bought their home well before the pickleball courts were installed. This feels like a good old bait and switch to me. I don't know about you guys, and as people characterize Lake Bluff as a kind, loving community, if we're really that, then why doesn't someone communicate with I just feel like I agree with the woman who said, why are we paying all these attorneys? Why are we paying attorneys? Why aren't we just communicating with each other? Why are these boards not communicating with each other? Why doesn't the park board call the village president and work this out? This isn't who we are, you guys. This is not who we are. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Scott Weber.
Scott Weber, 712 Moffett Road. First, I moved here, boy, it's been 10 years now, and raise our family here, and I wanted to give back to the community from a very early point. I joined the Finance Committee as a citizen in 2019, and then I was elected to the board in 2021. And boy, it's been a long process. It seems like there are fires to put out left and right in this community. And I agree with a lot of the sentiment here that it isn't what makes this community great, is all the divisiveness. But one of the cool things about being on this committee is working with people like Katie on the Friends of the Park. We had a seminar, half-day seminar last year, and it was like, hey, how do we tell the story of the Lake Bluff Park District and all the ways that the Park District impacts everyone in this community, cradle to grave? And it's true. Jennifer put it up there earlier about literally everything from, your first bike ride at a certain park, or the beach, or the pool, or going to preschool. All three of my kids went through the preschool. And I look at that campus over there, and it's like, this is a public country club. Like, there are very, very few communities who have this. And quite frankly, I'm very encouraged by the science-based study that we saw here tonight. Decibel levels do drop if you actually apply science and math. Do they get down to the 50 decibel level that you brought up, George? No, they don't, but they get us down to what is acceptable to the village of Lake Bluff. And what I've heard here tonight is Blair Park is, the houses are too close. Well, if you look at the studies, Artesian Park is also in the scope of work as well. And the decibel levels, given the mitigation that was proposed, are drastically similar. And those houses, while farther in proximity, are still within that kind of 500-foot range that we've all talked about. And so if we choose one or the other, I feel like we're not making a proper comparison. So I think the question here is, do we trust the science-based studies? And if we do, we need to proceed with the mitigation factors. But if we don't, I don't think pickleball can exist in Lake Bluff in its current state, barring some type of standalone facility, which you saw from the finances of the Lake Bluff Park District, we simply don't have. So you have a very unique problem on your hands, and I look forward to continuing the discussion next month. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so next we'll open up to, there are two people online who have had hands up for a while, so we will ask the first one.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. You're all tired of looking at my smiling face, and I've been holding that smile for 3 hours. So I will go through my name. My name is Bob Clifford. I live at 320 Circle Drive, and I just want to share a couple of quick stories that relate to what's going on here. Back in 2010 and 2011, as many of us will recall, the Lake Bluff Middle School built an addition to the school. And part of that addition included a 10-ton chiller for air conditioning for the school that was placed on the east side of the addition on the ground. The chiller did not include any sound attenuation to block what turned out to be a very high-pitched whining noise that emanated from the unit while operating. Ultimately, this caused considerable discomfort anytime that we went outside in our backyard or opened our windows or gathered with our neighbors in the front out on Circle Drive. We lived with this condition for about 2 years, and it got to the point, like the Gamrest, that we started looking for other places to live. It wasn't until we invited the interim superintendent of the district at that time, some will remember Ben Martindale, to come over to our houses and experience firsthand the noise nuisance. And Ben did that. And he came over one Saturday morning and sat with all the neighbors in the front. And once he heard the noise, he took action to remedy the situation. And had this construction proposal been presented to the neighbors in a way that there was an opportunity to express concerns and give feedback, we could have avoided the 2 years of angst and discomfort. And the school district could have saved the $150,000 they spent to remedy the situation after the fact. Fast forward to this last year, the middle school proposed adding the sport court to the open field on the east side of the school. But prior to seeking the approval from the village, they engaged the neighbors and they shared the plans. They asked for feedback, and most importantly, they sought feedback from those neighbors that would be affected. The neighbors had the opportunity to express their concerns during the process. And by working with the neighbors that would be affected, the middle school got what they wanted and the neighbors' concerns were recognized. And I think that's the message I want to share here tonight. To the best of my knowledge, the neighbors most affected by the current pickleball noise nuisance at Blair Park did not have the opportunity to express their concerns, and the proper process for making changes to the existing facilities was not followed by the park district. And that doesn't sound very neighborly to me. I'd like to think that one thing Lake Bluff does pretty well is look out for each other and take care of one another. So thank you, and please remove my face from the screen.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, and then next, we have someone with a hand up online identified as Gary, so we'll allow you to talk as well.
Okay, hi, everybody. Yeah, Gary Doyle, 545 East Scranton Avenue. I wanted to register my support to the neighbors who live next to the pickle courts in Blair Park. I play pickleball. I've played at Blair and Artesian Park. I enjoy the game. But to the people in support of the Blair court, I would ask you, how would you feel if you'd been living in your home happily for 20 years and all of a sudden 6 pickleball courts were built next to your house with no sound protection whatsoever, with no permit and no community hearing? Would you be in favor of these courts? I somehow don't think so. The pickleball situation here has devolved into a mess. While Lake Forest just opened a spectacular new pickle facility, our park board fights with the village board, doesn't engage with the village board for some reason. In fact, the village unbelievably is considering suing the park board because of that non-response. And the courts are open half the week. And at the artesian pickleball courts, you have to move a rolling net around and guess where it should go to form a proper court. It's all kind of ridiculous. The simple solution to me, which I think should have been implemented in the first place, would be to return the Blair Park courts to tennis and turn the artesian courts into strictly pickleball. It's a more popular sport than tennis, and there are less neighbor concerns at artesian. But failing that, I hope the zoning board does the right thing and disallows pickleball at its current Blair Park location. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay, next is Nisha Patel Burns.
Nisha Burns. I live at 530 East North Avenue. I first want to say thank you to the board for really hearing out the public tonight, albeit the late hour, and also for your service to the community. Pickleball, I agree, is a super fun and popular sport, which I believe that Lake Bluff, frankly, should support. The issue today is really around where specifically should pickleball be played. And I think to determine where we want to play pickleball, you have to ground ourselves with the facts, as we did, around the sound. And the science of decibels, the math of decibels, this idea that 40 decibels is what a quiet residential area is, 70 is what a pickleball is, each 10 decibels doubles the sound, the noise, which makes it 8 times louder for the pickleball at 70 decibels and the 40 for a quiet residential area. And it's not just the loudness, right? As we heard from the residents, it's about this erratic, tortuous pitch that creates, in my opinion, a health and a safety and a quality of life issue for our fellow residents. Now, you could say, well, is that just some cranky residents that are just complaining? I would argue that even the EPA, as we've heard, recommends an average 24-hour exposure limit of 55 decibels. And I think the spirit of even our own ordinance defines offensive noises as disturbing the peace and quiet of any neighborhood. These are our own words. So again, I think we can agree that there's an issue with the noise. And so the question, I too am an engineer, so I think a lot about what's the solution. So one could argue, well, let's really focus our energy around defining acceptable noise levels. But that's complicated. Are you going to talk about maximum decibels, average decibels over a certain period of time? I find that to be really complicated and impractical. You could also try and think about enforcing use of higher quality paddles that are less noise. I think we've also heard that that's also very challenging, and our experience with the Park District's ability to enforce rules has also been shown to be ineffective. Third, you could look at these sound mitigation strategies, arborvitaes, 14-foot walls, which I find to be costly, unsightly, and really out of character of what Lake Bluff, who we are as a space. So for me, while noise is the issue, I think the solution for us should be more focused on something practical that we can measure, which is distance. And I say that because even as we heard the cases today, distance is a very simple and easy thing for us to measure. In fact, today there were cases coming in talking about variances to distance. Today, you guys know this better. You put in place distances for setbacks, floor areas, daylight planes. These are very concrete measures that are easy for us to enforce. And that's the type of practicality I would urge us to really think about. So the call to action I would offer to the zoning board would be, one, to really discontinue the use of pickleball at Blair. I think it's already violating the health, quality, and safety. And the second is to enforce due process. We all are equal citizens, Park District citizens, where none of us are exempt from process that we all have put in place in Lake Bluff. And third is really to do the right thing for the quality of life, the health, and the safety of our residents, and focus our efforts more on codifying the distance away from pickleball, which we would hear even from experts as being anywhere in the 500 feet range. Thanks again for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am.
Roger Hecker.
Roger Hecker, 322 Mauman. I'm just here to support everybody's point of view. I think noise is a big factor. Just to give you an example, using the National Institute of Oceanography and Safety Monitor today, this meeting ranged from 54 to 78 decibels. So just be aware that even in our own meeting, we didn't meet the 54 decibel point. This is just an example. I'm a physician. I understand about the effects of noise and irritation, but I also have to say that I'm a citizen of Lake Bluff, and exercise is very important. You've seen by the data that a lot of people want to play pickleball. This is a lot of your own residents. As intimately knowing the Park District Board President, I know she's tried to work very well with the other boards associated with this. When it came down to relining the tennis courts, there were both the question about whether it was permitted or not permitted. The issue is it was already permitted as a racket area. So now there's a difference of whether a racket area versus a paddle area. So I don't think anything insidious was done at the time. I think they were trying to make use of the area for the best issues of the citizens who wanted to play pickleball. Pickleball is very good for inducing exercise. It is one of the biggest sports that are coming in the greater than age 65 range. It is something I recommend to my own patients. I'm an internal medicine physician, to have exercise and to be active. Our arthritis does better when we work around. If they wanted to play tennis, they should be playing tennis, but they want to play pickleball. I think that you should consider the use of a park as a park. Are we going to just make different points of view about the amount of noise level from the pool, the noise level from pickleball? I understand about the different pitch and levels, but the issue is if we do mitigation factors, you're going to decrease the decibel level and you're going to make use of an area that's already being used. So I'm just trying to say is be optimistic and take that into account when you make your decisions about zoning, because this is a very important sport for your community. It's a very healthy sport. And I understand the neighbors' concerns, but I think if you do mitigation factors, and if the city wants to provide funds and to help do that, that's wonderful. I'm just saying that you have to take the point of view of the individuals that also want to play. But we as neighbors want to be neighborly, we want to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Paul Greenfield.
We'll have an opportunity to speak after the next meeting, correct?
During the next meeting in May. Correct.
I'll wait till then.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Emily Lane, I believe. I'm gonna follow the state. Okay. Joy Marquis.
Hi, I'm Joy Marquis. My address is 117 West Blodgett Avenue in Lake Bluff. Thank you guys for being here. I've had my share of late night meetings, so I know what it's like. And it's my first time back in this room since being a trustee, so it's nice to be back. People have made so many great comments tonight, and I think this is an issue that we can look at on both sides, right? It's great exercise. It's loud. We have a lot of things to consider, and that's what we're doing here tonight. But I guess my wish in this scenario would have been to go back a year before and have this start a little differently and have the village and the park district working more in partnership to fix this issue. I feel like it's been a very contentious situation. I feel like we've spent a lot of taxpayer dollars on consultants and lawyers and money that we could have taken and put into this grant that could have helped the park district move the courts or do something else. I do not believe the park district in 2015 or whenever they relined the courts had any idea that what they were doing was going to be such an issue for the residents. I think that that is not generally the spirit of the park district or the spirit of this community. And here we are now, and I just would ask that going forward, we work in more of a partnership rather than this very contentious nature, which is how this feels right now. So that's the only thing I wanted to say tonight. I understand pickleball. My son plays a lot of basketball, and in the winter, he likes to play inside at the court at the park district, and many times he's come home and said, oh, the pickleball people are there again. And I tell him, you have to compromise. They want to exercise, you want to exercise, you check the schedule and make sure you can get in there on times when it's open. So that's really what I'm asking right now. Let's get to a point where we can compromise and everyone in the community feels good about the decision we find.
Thank you.
Corey McKendry.
Hi, my name is Corey McKendry. I live at 600 East Center, and I've lived in Lake Bluff for 30 years, and I happen to be high school tennis coach for, I think I'm going on 18 years, and I teach tennis and pickleball and paddle at the Park District. Not to mention, I did serve on the board for 12 years. But I'd like to say this, as the teacher teaching Lake Bluffers and so many new people from different communities, pickleball, besides the 8 homes, has been amazing for our town. It has brought so many people out of hibernation. I've gotten so many emails from neighbors saying, this is embarrassing, I've put on 25 pounds during COVID, or I've been so depressed since COVID, or I had a 58-year-old woman tell me this was the first thing she's ever done athletically. Like, it's crazy how it's brought so many people together and how wonderful it has been. I don't want to see pickleball disappear. I do think we could compromise, and I think it could work. I know I've spent hours on the courts. There is a tennis court, and then there's 4 courts. I would like to suggest, I don't want to hire consultants and lawyers. This is just killing me. I'm sorry. I don't like spending this kind of money. It is such a waste of money. It bothers me that Regis and John Beeler didn't sit down a year ago. It's pathetic and sad that Lake Bluff is where we're at today. But what I would like to recommend is take the tennis courts and the one tennis court and make it a tennis court. And if you move it back, there's 4 designated courts. And I don't know the numbers, but I think it'll be the right amount, or 100 feet or so. George, you would probably know, because I know you know these numbers, away from their homes. And put up the sound mitigation and use those 4 courts only for classes. And during open play, you can say during open play there would not be more than, I don't know, there's enough for 16 people. You could say limit it to 20 because people rotate. And it was really irritating watching everyone used to sit at the end by the tennis courts right next to their home and sit and talk afterwards. And it was dark and they were still there. And that would be super irritating for me too. But I think it could be solved if on the north end, closest where the shed is right now, closest to the paddle huts, if the village is willing to pay for it, and if they're willing to give $100,000, it will not cost this much money. But if they made a box cutout, like a backstop, where there's benches and somewhere there's like someone could lay their, bag down or their cooler or whatever it is, their water, in that little section, it would be so much better for them. It's not perfect, but compromising is everybody gives a little. This isn't perfect for the Park District. They would lose 2 courts. They would lose some revenue. We can work on the time. We don't have to be out there at the crack of dawn. When I offer intro classes, nobody wants to come at 7 in the morning anyways. So it could work if we move the time back and made it during like practical hours. Don't put lights in. Then there's no lights, and the people eventually have to leave. And if they do congregate, now they're closer to the paddle huts. So it could work. Do I think those owl paddles are a good idea? No. I remember Miss O told me 15 years ago when I was on the park board, she said, don't ever put policy and laws that you cannot control. No one is going to be watching who's walking in with a silent, quiet owl paddle, and no one wants to spend $150 and all of a sudden show up and see 3 other people with their regular paddles. That would tick me off if I went and bought one and then not everybody had it. I don't think that's worth, you can't control that. I would not deal with those quiet paddles. But I would do the sound mitigation, and I would not allow anyone on the tennis courts. And I think it really could work for them and for the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
John McIntosh.
Thank you. John McIntosh, 305 West Washington, corner Green Bay. I'm one of the 8. Been in the house 41 years, and I would say that my history with the Park District, with 2 or 3 good exceptions, one being Sandy Hart, when we did some work with the paddle, and then Ron Salsky. Other than that, the Park District has not been a good neighbor. I would describe them as arrogant and having misplaced priorities. When the rec center was designed at first, it was gigantic. It was voted down. A smaller version was put up. It was voted down. Park District went ahead and built. When the paddle came in, they got a free paddle court from the tennis club that folded, and they were gonna put this up very quickly and simply. Didn't work. Ron was very helpful at getting trees up and everything, but it was still the sense of being bulldozed by the Park District. When the paddle tennis went in, the school was being built at times, and all of a sudden, there was a deal made of land traded, and all of a sudden, the paddle tennis got approved. That's a backdoor deal, no matter how you slice it. That shouldn't happen in Lake Bluff. So that's the level generally of the park board. The second is the jewels that we talk about, which I agree, pool and beach are what make Lake Bluff. We need to keep those. But to put those on a 6.4 million budget and talk about those two jewels as being negatives is misplaced. Where's our tax money going if it's not for the beach and the pool? So I would say the sound mitigation should be measured. I would measure it from lot lines, not from indoors and not with windows closed. I like to grill in the backyard. I like to have people out. I have grandchildren that want to play. They want to play outside. We should measure the sound at the yard, not at the windows, and certainly not with the windows closed. This is summertime. This is Lake Bluff. You're going to drive us into air conditioning for the whole summer, and I think that's a mistake. Thank you for the work. I mean, I do enjoy the rec center. I had a heart attack, and I'm doing cardio workouts there, so I'm not against the park board, but I think misplaced priorities is still a problem.
Thank you, sir.
Sue Wicks.
Hi, I'm Sue Wicks, 111 Oak Terrace, and I'm going to be very brief. After listening to the sound person and everything everyone said, I really do think that the Blair Park courts are just too close to the neighbors. And I think that's just the bottom line. And I'm sure there's something that can be worked out because everybody's very smart and well-meaning. And I think that's what needs to happen.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dennis Copy. Dennis Copy. No. Jim Wicks.
Nope.
No.
He passes.
Okay. And then Kimberly Fleece. Okay, and that's exhausted our list. Is there anybody else looking to make public comment?
All right. Yeah, I think we've been, we've had a relatively full evening on this particular issue. There's a lot of ground to cover yet. And so my personal recommendation is to explore whether or not there's a possible motion to continue the public hearing, but I'll defer to the commissioners as to whether they want to generate that motion.
I'll move to continue till May 15th.
May 15th.
Second.
Second.
Roll call.
Roll call?
Member Miller,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Member Sorensen.
Aye.
Member Toll.
Aye.
Member Fisher.
Aye.
And Chair Peters.
Yeah, aye. Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for your patience tonight. Agenda item number 8.
Very few.
I agree.
Might take a while.
Yeah, you can make a statement that, I mean, we can either,
I was thinking, thanks for coming.
either wait for them a little or
It is annoying.
take a.
Want to live by there if I didn't have enough, if I didn't want to.
We'll be good citizens.
Right, it didn't.
Kenny Marquis said it best. They should have never gone on for the village and the park district.
I don't know what the answer is. I'd say move it.
So right now, I believe that there's an agreement that as long as the public hearing is still, like, as long as the matter's still before the board, they can play pickleball at those designated times. But
29 spaces there.
I know.
So nothing.
Believe me, as one of the attorneys that's too involved, apparently, we're trying our best. We're trying our best. I know, we are. We're trying our best. We're going through this. This is
We go?
We just got 5 minutes.
We're still on?
We have it in motion. No, that's.
So that part, I'm
yeah.
disappointed about people saying that it was deliberate and because that's nothing. That's
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. I think we can. Agenda item number 8.
Make it. Do you want to let them know that we're still doing a meeting? I don't think they know.
I think we can get it done.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Staff report?
Is there a staff report?
We'll say no staff report for today. And we can move on to the next.
How's the agenda look?
There are likely 2 public hearing items along with the pickleball. So
Including this one?
Especially when we
two
need to
public hearings,
continue
the
our
next
meeting.
one Plus the pickleball one.
Especially when we need to
Yeah,
continue our
not
meeting.
the first one.
Yeah.
we can figure out what that looks like.
Okay. All right. Agenda item number 9.
Commissioners report.
Commissioners report?
Commissioners report.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, that was for public comment. Yeah, you were an expert, so
Thank
you're
you,
okay.
sir.
Thank you.
Commissioners
Does
report?
anyone have a commissioners?
Hearing none.
All right, commissioners.
Agenda item number 10.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Elliot.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Voice vote.
Oh, yes.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye. Okay.
We're done.
Adjourned.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.